Some nights feel different before anything happens. The village is quiet yet unsettled, as if the darkness is listening. In Hawthorne House, a single light stays on while everyone else sleeps, and a guest walks the floors with careful steps. No one asks why. No one admits unease. But in small places, wakefulness is never harmless, and patience often hides a reason that will soon disturb everything they trust thereafter. Chapter 1. The first sign of trouble was not a scream or a crash or even a raised voice. It was a light, steady and patient, that burned in a top window of Hawthorne House long after the rest of St Aldwyn had folded itself into sleep. St Aldwyn was the sort of village that seemed to settle early, as if nightfall was an old habit stitched into the hedgerows. By 9:30, most curtains were drawn, most doors were bolted, and most conversations had moved from gardens and lanes into kitchens, where kettles hissed softly and the last of the day's warmth clung to china cups. The air held the faint scent of damp leaves and chimney smoke. Even in spring, there was always a little smoke. Miss Marple sat in the front parlor of the vicarage where she was staying, her knitting resting upon her lap. She had never been fond of wasting light, and she had never been fond of wasting time either. She watched the lamplight pool on the table, listened to the ticking clock, and allowed the village sounds to reach her as if they were part of the same pattern as her stitches. There was the distant bark of a dog that did not sound alarmed, only thoughtful. There was the faint roll of a cartwheel somewhere on the road, slow and late, likely old Mr. Pritchard coming back from the public house with more dignity than sense. And there was, through the window, the thin brightness of Hawthorne House's upper light, visible between two bare branches as if the house were holding up one finger to say, "Not yet." It was not her business, Miss Marple told herself. It was not her house, nor her lamp, nor her guest, and yet it had become her business the moment Mrs. Lucy Harrow stepped into the vicarage that afternoon with cheeks slightly flushed and a smile that did not quite fit. Mrs. Harrow was the mistress of Hawthorne House, and she was the kind of woman who could make a room seem more polished just by entering it. Her clothes were always chosen with care, never too grand for a village, yet never so plain that anyone might confuse her position. Her voice was pleasant, warm, lightly amused, and she had a habit of touching her necklace, as if to remind herself that she had something solid at her throat. She had come in with a basket of small cakes, which was the proper thing to do. She had made polite remarks about the vicar's roses, which was also proper. And she had finally said, as if it had slipped out by accident, that they were expecting a guest at Hawthorne House. Only Miss Marple had noticed how her fingers tightened on the basket handle when she said it. A guest, Mrs. Harrow explained, was an old acquaintance of her late husband's family. Someone in need of a peaceful week in the country. Someone of good manners and quiet habits. A name had been given, of course. Mr. Simon Vale. Mrs. Harrow said it as if it meant nothing, and yet she watched Miss Marple's face, perhaps to see if it meant something to her. Miss Marple had only nodded. She had learned long ago that the most useful expressions were the neutral ones. Then Mrs. Harrow had leaned in a fraction, lowering her voice, though no one else was in the room. "He has been unwell," she said. "A strain of sorts. Exhaustion. The doctor in London insisted on rest, and I felt it would be a kindness, considering the old connection." "How kind of you," the vicar had replied warmly, as vicars did. Mrs. Harrow smiled, and Miss Marple smiled too. But Miss Marple's smile was quieter, as if it were only for herself. Kindness, she reflected, was often the word chosen when people wished to hide the real reason they were doing something. Sometimes the real reason was pride. Sometimes it was guilt. Sometimes it was fear. And sometimes it was simply that one did not know how to refuse. The guest arrived the following evening. Miss Marple did not witness the arrival directly. That was not the sort of thing one did unless one had a reason. But St. Aldwyn had its own methods of observation. The postmistress saw the motor car pull in. The butcher's boy saw the suitcase carried up the steps. Mrs. Green at the cottage opposite heard the polite voice thanking the driver, and by the time Miss Marple took her walk past Hawthorne House the next morning, she had already heard the description. Tall, said Mrs. Green. Tall and too thin. Like a man who had been stretched. Quiet, said the postmistress, and well-dressed. He spoke as if he had been to good schools. Eyes, said the butcher's boy, rather pale. As if he had not slept properly for a long time. That last detail interested Miss Marple more than the rest. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was specific. Children and boys often noticed what adults ignored. They noticed things like tiredness and tension, because they recognized them without naming them. Hawthorne House itself was a good place for tired guests. It stood slightly apart from the village center, behind a clipped hedge and a small sweep of lawn. It had tall windows, and a front door painted a sensible dark color. Inside, one imagined thick carpets, polished wood, the faint scent of beeswax and old money. It was not a cold house, exactly, but it had the controlled warmth of a place where no one ever raised their voice. Miss Marple paused by the gate, as if admiring the daffodils, and looked up. The top-floor window was open a fraction. Curtains moved slightly. There was no face, no silhouette, just the sense of a room that was awake even in daylight, as if it did not quite understand the village rule of sleep. She continued on her way. There were errands to do, and people to greet. The village ran on the small wheels of routine, and Miss Marple did not disturb those wheels without good reason. She visited the post office. She collected a few items for the vicar's kitchen. She listened more than she spoke. In the afternoon, she was invited to tea at Hawthorne House, not by Mrs. Harrow herself, but by her companion, Miss Edith Bracknell, a woman whose job was to be useful without being noticed. Miss Bracknell was brisk, but kind. She had the sort of practical competence that suggested she kept secrets for a living. Mrs. Harrow greeted Miss Marple with that polished smile, and for a moment everything was as it should be. The sitting room was bright. The tea tray was arranged with precision. The cakes were homemade. The chairs were comfortable. And yet there was an extra presence in the room, like a new piece of furniture that did not match. Mr. Simon Vale entered a minute later. He moved quietly, not in a sneaking way, but in a manner that suggested he disliked drawing attention. His clothing was excellent, in an understated way. Nothing flashy. Everything fitted. His hands were neat, his nails clean, his cuffs correct. His face was narrow, and his skin had the slightly drawn look of someone who had spent too many nights in artificial light. But it was his eyes that held Miss Marple's attention. They were not wild. They were not frightened. They were controlled. Controlled in the way a man controls himself when he expects to be tested. Mr. Vale took Miss Marple's hand and bowed his head slightly. Just enough. As if he had learnt politeness in a place where manners mattered more than warmth. Miss Marple, he said, I have heard of you. St. Aldwyn is fortunate to have you. That was a curious thing to say. One did not usually congratulate a village on its residents. One might say, how fortunate you are to live here, or how lucky the vicar is to have you as a guest. But fortunate to have you suggested something else. Miss Marple only smiled. You are very kind, she replied. We are a peaceful place, and peace is a blessing. Mr. Vale's mouth curved, but not fully. Yes, he said softly. Peace. They sat. Mrs. Harrow tried to manage the conversation as she always did. She spoke of the weather. She spoke of the church fete that would take place in a few weeks. She spoke of the garden and how the tulips were doing well this year. Mr. Vale responded politely, always with the right amount of interest. But his gaze moved, not rudely, not like a man searching for valuables, but like a man mapping a room. He looked at the door, at the window, at the corner where the writing desk stood. He looked at the mantel clock and seemed to register its exact position. Miss Bracknell poured tea. Her hands were steady, yet she glanced once, quickly toward Mr. Vale, as if to check that he was settled, as if she had been instructed to watch him without appearing to do so. Miss Marple sipped her tea. She spoke of small village matters, as one did. She asked after Mrs. Harrow's cousin in Bath. She mentioned the new curate. She remarked on how charming the early blossoms were. And throughout, she observed, Mr. Vale did not touch the cake. He lifted his cup, but barely drank. His hands remained close together, fingers interlaced, as if he found comfort in keeping himself contained. When Mrs. Harrow laughed at something the vicar had said, Mr. Vale's eyes moved to her throat where her necklace sat, and he watched for a fraction of a second too long, then looked away. Mrs. Harrow's fingers went to the necklace at the same moment, lightly, almost unconsciously. Miss Marple did not miss that. At one point, Mr. Vale asked, with the careful tone of someone pretending it was casual, whether the village had many visitors. Not many, Mrs. Harrow said quickly. Not at this time of year. Some in summer. Walkers and such. And the railway station, Mr. Vale asked, is it far? A short drive, Mrs. Harrow replied. Or a brisk walk, if one is energetic. Mr. Vale nodded as if filing the information away. Miss Marple's knitting was in her bag, and for once she did not bring it out. She found that people revealed more when one's hands were still. Knitting could make a person think you were not paying attention. Mr. Vale's gaze returned again and again to the window. The light was fading outside, and the last of the day's warmth had softened. In the garden, a faint movement of leaves suggested a breeze. Nothing more. Still, Mr. Vale watched. Are you fond of walking? Miss Marple asked gently. He seemed slightly startled, as if he had forgotten she was there. Then he smiled that contained smile again. Not as much as I once was, he said. These days I find I prefer to remain indoors. Indoors, Miss Marple repeated. Yes. That can be sensible. He leaned back slightly, and the movement revealed something. The faintest shadow beneath his eyes, not dramatic, but like bruises that had been washed with gray water. The skin near his temples looked tight. You are recovering, Mrs. Harrow said in a bright tone, as if that explained everything, and should end the discussion. London has worn him out. Mr. Vale's eyes flicked to her. For a fraction of a second, something sharp moved across his face. Not anger exactly, more like impatience. Then it was gone. Yes, he said. London has worn me out. Miss Marple felt a small tightening of her thoughts. It was not the words, but the way they were spoken. People who were genuinely exhausted often sounded resigned. Mr. Vale sounded like someone repeating a story he had been told to repeat. The tea ended, as such teas always did, with polite farewells. Mrs. Harrow insisted Miss Marple take some cakes for the vicar. Miss Bracknell wrapped them carefully. Mr. Vale held the door open and wished her a pleasant evening. As Miss Marple stepped outside, she felt the air cooler. The sun had slipped away. The village was beginning to dim. She looked up almost without meaning to. The top window on the far side of the house was already lit. It was not yet fully dark. Miss Marple walked back to the vicarage through the quiet lanes. The hedges closed on either side. A thrush called once, then fell silent. Somewhere a gate creaked, then was still again. The village seemed calm, as it always did. Yet in her mind she had the picture of Mr. Vale's eyes, controlled and watchful, and the picture of Mrs. Harrow touching her necklace, and the picture of that lamp burning too early. At the vicarage, the vicar spoke cheerfully of the tea. Such a nice man, he said. Poor fellow. Clearly run down. How kind Lucy is to take him in. Miss Marple nodded and smiled, and made agreeable noises. But when she went to bed, she did not sleep as quickly as usual. Not because she was frightened. Miss Marple did not easily become frightened. It was because her mind had caught on a small thread. And threads, once caught, did not let go. Later, after midnight, she woke. The house was silent. The vicarage settled. Even the clock seemed to tick more softly. Miss Marple sat up slightly and looked out of the small window. Across the village, above the dark line of trees, she could see Hawthorne House. And in the upper room, the light still burned. It burned steadily, as if someone in that house had no intention of letting the village sleep without him. By morning, St Aldwyn had returned to itself with the stubborn confidence of places that believe nothing truly changes. The milk cart rattled along the lane. A child's laughter drifted from somewhere near the green. The church bells did not ring, for it was not Sunday, but the tower stood as it always did, watching. Miss Marple rose early, washed, dressed, and took her breakfast with the vicar. She listened to his gentle commentary about parish matters, nodded at the right moments, and kept her tone calm. There was no reason to speak of lights and windows. People tended to think such things were either romantic or silly. After breakfast she walked, as she always did, along the lane that curved past Hawthorne House. She did not walk too fast. She did not look as if she were going anywhere in particular. She carried a small basket, as if she meant to pick a few early flowers for the vicarage table. Outside Hawthorne House, the garden was neat, and the lawn was trimmed. Even the gravel seemed arranged. There was a row of shrubs near the side wall, thick enough to give privacy. Beyond them, a narrow path ran toward the back of the house where a service door was set into the stone. Miss Marple paused at the hedge and admired a cluster of pale blooms. Her fingers touched them lightly. From inside the house came a sound that was not quite a sound at all, more the soft closing of a drawer. Then a footstep. A second footstep. Slow, deliberate. She did not look up. The front door opened. Miss Bracknell stepped out with a small tray in her hands. She was not carrying tea for visitors. The tray held a plate, a cup, and a covered dish. She moved toward the side path with the practical speed of someone with duties that could not be postponed. "Good morning, Miss Marple," she called when she noticed her. "Good morning, Miss Bracknell," Miss Marple replied warmly. "Such a lovely day, is it not?" Miss Bracknell glanced upward, a quick movement. Her eyes flicked to the top floor. Then she looked back at Miss Marple and smiled, but it was a smile tightened at the edges. "Yes," she said. "Lovely." "You are carrying breakfast," Miss Marple observed gently. "For Mr. Vale," Miss Bracknell replied, and there was a slight pause, as if she had almost not said the name. "Is he not down yet?" Miss Marple asked, still as if speaking of weather. Miss Bracknell's expression became very correct. "Mr. Vale prefers his meals brought to him," she said. "How very restful," Miss Marple said. "Rest is what he needs, I am sure." Miss Bracknell did not respond to that. She shifted the tray slightly, as if eager to move on. Then she said, perhaps because the silence pressed upon her, or perhaps because Miss Marple's voice made it seem safe, "Mr. Vale keeps rather odd hours." "Odd hours," Miss Marple repeated, and made it sound as if she found that charming. Miss Bracknell gave a small nod, then began to walk again. "Good day, Miss Marple." "Good day, my dear." Miss Marple continued on, but her mind stayed with the tray and the way Miss Bracknell had looked up first before speaking. It was a habit of servants to check where their employers were. But this felt different. It felt like checking whether the person who might overhear was awake. She turned at the end of the lane and walked back toward the village, as if her flowers had not been worth picking after all. She stopped at the post office. There were 2 women there already, the sort who always seemed to be in the post office, as if collecting letters were a full-time occupation. They were speaking, in the lowered, eager tones of people who had news that was not official. Miss Marple greeted them pleasantly, waited, and listened. Mrs. Clements, the baker's wife, was saying, "I tell you, I saw the light, gone midnight, and still that window was glowing like a ship's lantern." Mrs. Reed, who lived near Hawthorne House, leaned in. "And did you see him?" she asked. "No," Mrs. Clements replied. "That's the strange part. Not a shadow, not a movement, just light, steady and plain." Mrs. Reed sniffed. "Maybe he reads." she suggested. At midnight, Mrs. Clements said, with that tone that meant she found it improper. Miss Marple moved closer, examined a rack of postcards, and spoke as if she were merely making conversation. "Mr. Vale, is it?" she said lightly. "Mrs. Harrow's guest." Mrs. Reed glanced at her, eager to include her. "Yes, Miss Marple," she said. "The London gentleman. Mrs. Harrow says he is resting, but if you ask me, there is more to it. A man doesn't come to St Aldwyn just to rest unless something has chased him out of the city." "Chased," Miss Marple repeated softly, and allowed the word to sit there. Mrs. Clements lowered her voice further. "My Alf says he heard a motor car late last night," she murmured. "Not like the milk cart, mind you. A proper motor car. Went past his shop, headlights on, slow as if searching." Mrs. Reed's eyes widened. "Searching for what?" she whispered. Mrs. Clements shrugged, but her mouth tightened with excitement. "Who can say? Perhaps someone came for him. Perhaps he is not supposed to be here." Miss Marple selected a stamp and paid for it, giving the postmistress a pleasant smile. She did not add to the speculation. She did not need to. The village could do that on its own. Yet as she walked away, she wondered about the motor car. The village heard everything at night because there was so little noise to cover it. If a motor car had passed, it meant someone had come close to Hawthorne House. Close enough to look. The next invitation came that afternoon, not to tea, but to the church committee meeting at the vicarage, where Mrs. Harrow would attend as she always did, looking composed and helpful. Miss Marple sat at the edge of the room with her knitting and observed the way people entered. Mrs. Harrow arrived on time, carrying a folder. She greeted everyone warmly. She looked a touch tired, though her lipstick was still perfect. Behind her came Miss Bracknell, who carried nothing and looked as if she would rather be anywhere else. She sat slightly apart. Mr. Vale did not come, of course. A guest would not attend a village committee meeting. That would be too forward. And yet, Miss Marple noticed that Mrs. Harrow's eyes flicked toward the window more than once, as if she were checking the light, or checking that the village outside was still village. The meeting proceeded with discussions about bunting, cake stalls, and the placement of tables. It was all very ordinary, but ordinary discussions often revealed ordinary tensions. And ordinary tensions could be the most honest thing in a room. When someone mentioned that the feat would likely draw visitors from nearby towns, Mrs. Harrow's hand paused over her notes. "Visitors," Mrs. Harrow repeated, smiling. "How wonderful for St. Aldwyn." Her tone was right, but her fingers tightened on her pen. Miss Marple's knitting needles clicked softly. After the meeting, as chairs were moved and people drifted away, Miss Marple found herself beside Miss Bracknell near the tea tray. "You do so much, Miss Bracknell," Miss Marple said kindly, as if speaking to any competent woman. "Mrs. Harrow is fortunate to have you." Miss Bracknell's expression shifted. Compliments sometimes embarrassed her, but this one seemed to touch something else. She looked toward the doorway, then lowered her voice. "Mrs. Harrow does not like fuss," she said. "No," Miss Marple agreed. "Most ladies do not." Miss Bracknell hesitated, then added, almost against her will, "Mr. Vale does not like fuss either." Miss Marple poured herself a small cup, as calm as ever. "Does he not?" she said gently. "No," Miss Bracknell said, and her words came out quickly now, as if a dam had cracked just a fraction. "He prefers things quiet. He prefers to keep to himself. He asks questions, though, about the house. Doors, windows, locks. He wants to know what is where." Miss Marple stirred her tea slowly. "That seems sensible," she replied. "A man unused to a house might wish to know his way about, especially at night." Miss Bracknell's eyes flicked to Miss Marple's face, sharp and quick. "At night," she repeated. "Yes," Miss Marple said softly, meeting her gaze with a look that held no judgment, only interest. People do sometimes wake at night when they are unwell. Miss Bracknell looked away. He wakes, she said, barely above a whisper. He never truly sleeps. I bring him breakfast, and the bed has not been touched. The sheets are smooth. He sits in his chair by the window as if he has been there for hours. Miss Marple's hand remained steady around her cup. Her voice did not change. That must be very tiring for him, she said. It is not only tiring, Miss Bracknell replied, and then stopped, as if she had said too much. Miss Marple waited. Miss Bracknell took a breath. Sometimes, she said, I think he is listening. Not resting. Listening. To what? Miss Marple asked, but her tone was as gentle as an afternoon breeze. No pressure. No interrogation. Miss Bracknell swallowed. He asked me yesterday, she said, if anyone could approach the house from the back without being seen. He asked me about the gate by the orchard. The one that creaks. Miss Marple's mind pictured that gate, and the hedge that partly hid it, and how a person might slip through in darkness. Why would he ask such a thing? Miss Marple murmured. Miss Bracknell shook her head. I do not know, she said. Mrs. Harrow says he is just anxious, London nerves. But I have served anxious people. They fret and complain and ring bells and demand broth. Mr. Vale does none of that. He is quiet. He is careful, like a man who expects someone to come. Expecting someone, Miss Marple repeated softly, and let it settle. Miss Bracknell glanced again toward the doorway. Please do not repeat what I have said, she added quickly. It is not my place. Of course not, Miss Marple said kindly. Your loyalty does you credit. Miss Bracknell looked relieved, but also troubled. She moved away with the empty cups, her back straight, her steps brisk. Miss Marple sat down again with her knitting, and her needles began their quiet rhythm. She did not appear to think, but her mind was already arranging the small pieces. A guest brought in out of kindness. A guest who asked about locks and gates. A light that burned all night. A motor car passing slowly after midnight. A man whose bed was not rumpled. There were innocent explanations. A man could have insomnia. A man could be nervous and ask practical questions. A visitor could have passed through the village for any number of reasons. Miss Marple never leapt to conclusions. She had seen too many villages jump and be wrong. But she had also seen how often people lied most carefully when they believed they were being kind. That evening, the vicar walked with Miss Marple as far as the lane before turning back. You are quiet tonight, he observed with a warm smile. Just thinking of the feet, Miss Marple replied. Ah, yes, he said. It will be a happy day. Mrs. Harrow does so much, and that Mr. Vale seems a decent fellow. Poor man. I hope he finds rest here. Miss Marple smiled. Yes, she said. Rest. When she returned to the vicarage, she found herself pausing at the window again, as she had the night before. The village lights were fewer now. Hawthorne House stood darker against the night. Then, as if on cue, the upper window light came on. Not the soft yellow glow of a bedside lamp, not the warm blur of someone reading in comfort. It was bright, clear, steady, as if someone wanted the room fully lit, to see every corner, to make sure nothing moved unseen. Miss Marple watched it for a long time. In her mind, she pictured Mr. Vale sitting in a chair, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the glass, listening, and she thought, with a calm certainty that felt like the final pull of a thread, that a man who never slept was not always a man who could not rest. Sometimes he was a man who dared not. And if he dared not, then the question was simple, and it was the sort of question that could unfold a whole village. Who was coming for him? And why? She turned away from the window and went to bed, her face composed, her hands steady, her heart quiet. But even as she lay down, the light from Hawthorne House continued to burn, patient and unblinking, like a watchful eye that refused to close. Chapter 2. Morning in St Aldwyn always sounded the same at first. A kettle beginning to whisper, a door opening with a careful hinge, a robin scolding the world from a hedge as if it owned the lane. The sameness was comforting to most people. It promised that nothing had shifted in the night. Miss Marple had learned that sameness could also be a mask. She rose early again, not because she had slept badly, but because her mind had settled into that clear, attentive state that came when something small refused to be ignored. She dressed in quiet layers, pinned her brooch, and sat for a moment by the window with her hands folded. Across the village, Hawthorne House remained still. The top window was dark now, which meant only that the light had finally been turned off, not that anyone had slept. At breakfast, the vicar spoke of a parishioner who had sprained her ankle and of the hedges that needed trimming near the church path. Miss Marple responded suitably, but her attention drifted to the way the vicar's wife, long gone, had once complained about the noise of late carts. Small memories arrived like gentle tap-taps on a door, reminding her that villages did not change, only the names did. After breakfast, she took her basket and walked toward the green. She meant to buy thread and a few household things, but also to pass the places where gossip gathered like dust. It was not that she sought gossip for its own sake. It was simply that gossip was often the first form of truth, badly dressed. At the post office, the bell above the door gave its modest ring. The postmistress, Mrs. Lang, looked up with a smile that was quick to form and quick to fade, as if she had too much to think about. "Good morning, Miss Marple," she said. "Fine day again." "Fine days can be deceptive," Miss Marple replied softly, selecting her stamps. Mrs. Lang hesitated, then leaned slightly over the counter, lowering her voice. "It's that guest at Hawthorne House," she said. "People are talking." Miss Marple lifted her eyes with mild interest. "Are they?" she asked. Mrs. Lang nodded as if relieved to have an excuse. "I had Mrs. Reed in here before 8, she said. "And she swears she heard footsteps in the lane at 2:30 this morning. Slow ones. Like someone walking and stopping. Walking and stopping." "Footsteps in the lane," Miss Marple repeated. "And Mrs. Clements says she saw a figure in the upstairs window," Mrs. Lang added, though she could not say if it was the guest or someone else. "Someone else," Miss Marple echoed, and let the phrase hang. Mrs. Lang breathed out. "They say he never sleeps," she said. "They say the lamp stays on and the curtain never closes." Miss Marple smiled gently as she paid. "People do like a story," she murmured. Mrs. Lang lowered her voice further. "It is not only a story," she said. "I had a letter this morning. For him. No stamp from the village. It came in with the London post. But the writing on the envelope, it was odd. Sharp. Pressed hard. As if whoever wrote it wanted the paper to bleed." Miss Marple did not change her expression. "And will it be delivered?" she asked. "Of course," Mrs. Lang said quickly. "It is my duty." "Naturally," Miss Marple replied. "Duty is a good thing." She left the post office with her stamps and thread, and with the new piece of information folded quietly into her thoughts. A letter could mean anything. Yet the description of the writing, sharp and pressed, suggested urgency, or anger, or both. She continued toward the green where the village sat around its small heart of grass and benches. There were a few people moving about. Old Mr. Pritchard sat on the bench with his walking stick across his knees as if guarding the space. Two children chased each other in circles. A woman shook out a rug near her cottage door. Miss Marple stopped near the churchyard gate, where the gravestones stood in polite rows and the yews cast long shadows even in sunlight. She looked down at the names as she always did, not because she knew them all, but because she believed names mattered. A voice spoke behind her, "Miss Marple." She turned. Mrs. Harrow approached, dressed in a light coat, her hair neat, her posture perfect. But her eyes were not as restful as her appearance suggested. They held a thin brightness, like a lamp turned too high. "How nice to see you," Mrs. Harrow said. "Are you enjoying your time with us?" "Very much," Miss Marple replied. "It is a charming village." Mrs. Harrow smiled. Then, after a pause too careful to be accidental, she said, "I hope you found Mr. Vale agreeable." Miss Marple held her gaze warmly. "He is very polite," she said. "Very composed." Mrs. Harrow's fingers went to her necklace again, a light touch that lasted a fraction longer than before. "Yes," she said, "he is composed. He has had to be. Poor man. Had to be," Miss Marple repeated softly. Mrs. Harrow laughed, in a brittle little way. "London," she said. "It wears people down. You know what it is like." Miss Marple did not contradict her. She had been to London many times. She knew it wore people down in different ways. "And is he resting?" Miss Marple asked. Mrs. Harrow's smile tightened. "As well as can be expected," she said. "He has some trouble sleeping, but the doctor warned us of that. He is not to be disturbed." "Not to be disturbed," Miss Marple said gently. Mrs. Harrow nodded quickly. "Yes," she said. "It is best he keeps to himself." She made a motion as if to leave, but then stopped and added, almost as if she could not help herself, "People in the village can be unkind. They talk. I hope you will not encourage them." Miss Marple's voice remained mild. "People talk because they are curious," she said. "Curiosity is not always unkindness." Mrs. Harrow's eyes flashed. "It can be," she replied. And then she smoothed her expression again. "Forgive me. I am tired. It has been a little difficult, having a guest." "Of course," Miss Marple said kindly. "Guests can change the rhythm of a household." Mrs. Harrow nodded, and her eyes drifted for a moment toward Hawthorne House as if she could see it through the hedges. Then she straightened. "Well," she said quickly, "I must go. There are arrangements to make." She walked away with her usual brisk grace, and Miss Marple watched her until she disappeared behind the trees. There was fear in that woman, Miss Marple thought. Not the dramatic fear of danger in the dark, but the quiet fear of reputation, of being watched, of something pressing in from outside. That afternoon, Miss Marple visited Mrs. Reed, not because she wished to pry, but because Mrs. Reed had invited her for tea in a tone that clearly meant, "I have something to say." Mrs. Reed's cottage sat closer to Hawthorne House than most, and her sitting-room window faced the lane that led to the Harrow property. Mrs. Reed was the kind of woman who kept her lace curtains clean and her observations cleaner. Tea was poured, biscuits were offered, and within minutes the topic arrived as surely as a kettle reaches boiling. "That guest," Mrs. Reed said, leaning forward. "It is not natural, Miss Marple." "What is not natural?" Miss Marple asked softly. "The light," Mrs. Reed said. "The way he keeps that window bright. The way he stands there. I tell you I have seen him, clear as day. But at night. Standing in his room like a man waiting for a train." "A man waiting for a train," Miss Marple repeated, and the image settled neatly into place beside Miss Bracknell's whispered word, "listening." Mrs. Reed lowered her voice. "And there is more," she said. "Last night, very late, I heard the orchard gate creak. That gate by the back. No one uses it at night. No one decent, anyway." Miss Marple's hands rested around her cup. "Did you see anyone?" she asked. "No," Mrs. Reed said with frustration. "But I heard it. Creak, pause. Creak, again. Like someone opening it slowly to keep it quiet. Then footsteps, soft in the grass. Then nothing." "Nothing," Miss Marple murmured. Mrs. Reed's eyes widened. "And then," she said, "I heard another sound. A tap on glass. Just once. Like someone tapping a window." Miss Marple's heart remained calm, but her mind sharpened. "A tap on glass," she repeated. Mrs. Reed nodded vigorously. "Yes. One tap. Not a bird. Not wind. It was a human sound. And after that, the upstairs light at Hawthorne House went brighter, as if someone turned it up, as if someone wanted to see. Miss Marple looked down at her tea. "Do you know which window?" she asked, keeping her tone mild. Mrs. Reed pointed. "Top floor. The one facing the orchard, not the lane. I can see it if I stand at my back step." "I stood there, Miss Marple. I did, and I saw the curtain move." "The curtain moved," Miss Marple said quietly. Mrs. Reed leaned back, satisfied to have delivered her information. "You see," she said, "I am not imagining it." "No," Miss Marple replied. "You are observing." "And what do you think it means?" Mrs. Reed asked, eager now for Miss Marple's judgment. Miss Marple smiled gently. "I think it means someone is awake who would rather be asleep," she said. Mrs. Reed frowned, disappointed. "That is all," she said. "It is often enough," Miss Marple replied softly. "Being awake at the wrong time can change everything." When Miss Marple left Mrs. Reed's cottage, the sun was low again. The village had a hush that came before evening chores. She walked slowly toward the vicarage, but when she reached the bend where Hawthorne House could be seen through the trees, she stopped. The top window was dark. Then, as if sensing her gaze, it brightened. Not with a gentle glow, but with a sudden clear light, as if a lamp had been clicked on without hesitation. Miss Marple stood still, her basket on her arm, her face calm. A man who slept poorly might turn on a lamp. But a man who feared the dark did not usually choose the brightest light. Bright light was for seeing, for watching, for searching. She turned away and continued home. That night, she did not go to bed early. She sat in the parlor with her knitting and the vicar's quiet conversation drifting around her. When the vicar finally retired, she remained a little longer, listening to the silence. At 11:30, she went upstairs, but she did not immediately lie down. She stood by her window and looked out. Hawthorne House's upper light burned. At midnight it burned. At 1 it burned. At 2 it burned. At 2:15, Miss Marple saw something else. A faint movement near the back of Hawthorne House. Not at the front, but where the orchard lay. She could not see a person clearly. The distance was too leading, the darkness too soft, but she saw a change in the darkness, as if a shadow had shifted. Then, a moment later, a brief glint, like a small flash of metal-catching moonlight. A buckle. A watch. A key. Then darkness again. Miss Marple did not move. She watched the top window. The curtain shifted. A shape appeared behind it, tall and thin. The shape remained still for a long moment, as if listening. Then the light in that room brightened suddenly, sharper, whiter, as if another lamp had been lit or the shade removed. Miss Marple's fingers tightened slightly on the window frame, and that was all. She stepped back. She did not wake the vicar. She did not call out. She did not rush into the lane. Her mind was already working, calm and steady, because panic was never useful. She had seen enough of human nature to know that the first instinct was always wrong. But she knew this much with certainty. Someone had approached Hawthorne House in the night, and Mr. Simon Vale had been waiting. In the morning, Miss Marple went about her day as if nothing had happened, because that was how one survived in a village, without becoming the village entertainment. She ate her breakfast, complimented the vicar on his marmalade, and spoke of the weather in a voice that carried no trace of midnight shadows. Yet, she watched more closely now. She watched the lane as she walked, the small scuffs in the dirt where a shoe might have stepped off the path. She watched the orchard boundary from a distance, the line of hedge where someone could slip through. She watched the faces of villagers, because faces changed when they had been awake at the wrong hour. At the post office, Mrs. Lang looked tired. "You are early, Miss Marple," she said, forcing a smile. I like to be early, Miss Marple replied. It makes the day feel longer. Mrs. Lang hesitated, then pulled a letter from beneath the counter as if she had been waiting for an excuse. That letter for Mr. Vale, she said quietly. It was collected late last night. Collected, Miss Marple repeated. Mrs. Lang nodded. Not delivered by the post, she added quickly, as if correcting herself. Miss Bracknell came for it. She said Mrs. Harrow asked her to fetch it rather than let it sit. She seemed anxious, more anxious than usual. Miss Marple's eyes remained gentle. Did she say why she was anxious? She asked. Mrs. Lang shook her head. Only that it was important, she said. I saw the writing again as I handed it over. Sharp. Hard. Whoever wrote it was angry, I would wager. Miss Marple thanked her and left, but she did not walk straight home. Instead, she took the long way round, past the orchard hedge. She did not go close enough to appear suspicious. She merely strolled, as elderly ladies did, admiring the early buds and the way sunlight struck the grass. Near the orchard gate, she saw something. A scrape mark low on the wood, as if something metal had brushed it. A latch, perhaps, or a tool. The gate itself was slightly ajar, no more than a finger's width, but not fully closed. She did not touch it. She simply noted it and continued walking. Later, around midday, she received an unexpected visitor at the vicarage. Miss Bracknell arrived, not carrying a tray, not dressed for village errands, but wearing her coat as if she had stepped outside quickly and without careful thought. Her eyes were unsettled. Miss Marple, she said when she was shown into the parlor. I hope I am not disturbing you. Not at all, Miss Marple replied warmly. Please sit down. You look as if you have not had enough tea. Miss Bracknell sat on the edge of a chair, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles paled. I should not be here, she began. Miss Marple poured tea without haste. You are here now, she said gently. That is what matters. Miss Bracknell took a breath. Mr. Vale asked me something this morning, she said. He asked me to go into the village and purchase a certain kind of oil. Lamp oil, not the sort we use. A clear, refined kind. Miss Marple's movements remained calm. For his lamp, perhaps, she suggested. Yes, Miss Bracknell said quickly, but it was not only the oil. He gave me a list. Small items. A length of thin cord. A new torch. A packet of matches, though there are matches in every drawer of the house. Miss Marple's eyes lifted slightly. That seems very thorough, she said. Miss Bracknell's voice dropped. It is not thoroughness, she said. It is preparation. Miss Marple set the teapot down softly. Preparation for what, my dear? She asked. Miss Bracknell's gaze flicked to the window as if afraid someone might pass outside and hear. Then she looked back. I think he is expecting someone, she whispered. I think someone came last night. Miss Marple did not react outwardly. She only stirred her tea. What makes you think that? She asked. Miss Bracknell swallowed. At 3 a.m, she said. I was awake. I heard movement in the corridor. I thought it was Mrs. Harrow, but it was not. It was Mr. Vale. He was fully dressed. Shoes on. Coat. He moved like someone who knew exactly where he was going. And you saw him, Miss Marple said softly. Yes, Miss Bracknell replied. He did not see me. I was in the shadow of the landing. He went downstairs, not toward the front, but toward the back stairs that lead near the pantry and service door. Miss Marple nodded slightly. What happened then? She asked. Miss Bracknell's breath trembled. There was a sound, she said. A small sound. Like a knock, not at the front door. At the back, I think. He paused. He stood still for a moment, as if listening. Then he opened something. I heard a hinge. Miss Marple's mind returned to the shadow she had seen, the glint of metal. Did you see anyone else? She asked. No, Miss Bracknell said. That is what frightens me. I did not see anyone, but I heard a voice. A man's voice, low and quick. I could not make out the words, but the tone was not friendly. Miss Marple's voice remained calm. "And Mr. Vale?" she asked. "How did he respond?" Miss Bracknell's eyes widened. "He did not respond like a frightened man," she said. "He responded like a man who had rehearsed. He spoke quietly, firmly, as if giving instructions. Then I heard another sound, a soft thud, like a bag set down, or a suitcase." Miss Marple's fingers rested on her cup. "And then?" she asked. "Then the back door closed again," Miss Bracknell whispered, "and Mr. Vale returned upstairs. He went into his room, and I heard the lock click, not once, but twice, as if he turned it fully." Miss Marple nodded slowly. "Did you tell Mrs. Harrow?" she asked. Miss Bracknell shook her head quickly. "No," she said. "I could not. Mrs. Harrow is already strained. And besides, she keeps saying it is nothing, that he is only unwell." Miss Marple's gaze softened. "And what do you believe, Miss Bracknell?" Miss Bracknell's voice broke slightly. "I believe he is not unwell," she said. "I believe he is hiding." Miss Marple did not contradict her. She did not confirm it either. She simply said, quietly now, "What do you know of Mr. Vale?" "Before he arrived, did Mrs. Harrow speak of him?" Miss Bracknell hesitated. "Only that he was known to Mr. Harrow's family long ago," she said. "That he had helped them in some matter. That he had fallen on hard times, perhaps. Or had been through something." Miss Marple nodded. "And the letter from London?" she asked. "Did you see it?" Miss Bracknell's hands tightened. "Yes," she said. "Mr. Vale had it in his hand this morning. He did not read it in front of me, but he looked at the envelope as if it were a threat. Then he put it in his pocket and said, 'We must be careful. We must be careful,'" Miss Marple repeated softly. Miss Bracknell looked at her with sudden desperation. "Miss Marple," she said, "forgive me. I know you are not involved. But you are wise. People say you understand things. I do not like what is happening in that house. It feels like waiting for a storm that no one else can see." Miss Marple reached out and patted her hand. A light touch, steady and warm. "Storms are often seen first by those who listen," she said. "You have listened. That is not nothing." Miss Bracknell's eyes filled, but she blinked it away quickly. "What should I do?" she asked. Miss Marple considered. "Do not accuse," she said softly. "Do not confront. But observe. And if you feel genuinely unsafe, you must speak to someone with authority." "The police," Miss Bracknell whispered, horrified. "Not yet," Miss Marple said calmly. "Not unless there is clear reason. A village can be ruined by a wrong accusation as surely as by a crime." Miss Bracknell nodded, breathing slowly as if trying to calm herself. Then she rose. "Thank you, Miss Marple," she said. "I should return." Miss Marple walked her to the door and watched her hurry down the path, her coat pulled tight. When Miss Bracknell was gone, Miss Marple returned to the window and looked toward Hawthorne House. In daylight, it appeared ordinary again. Solid. Proper. Respectable. But respectability was one of the finest disguises in the world. Later that evening, Miss Marple received an invitation to dine at Hawthorne House. It was delivered by Mrs. Harrow's young maid, cheeks pink from walking fast. "Mrs. Harrow requests the pleasure of your company," the girl said, and looked relieved when Miss Marple accepted, as if she had been anxious about delivering the message. At Hawthorne House, the dining room was lit with soft lamps and a small fire. The table was set beautifully. Mrs. Harrow was seated, composed. Mr. Vale arrived a few minutes later, looking immaculate, as if he had not spent the day in tension. During dinner, the conversation remained polite. Mrs. Harrow spoke of the garden again. Mr. Vale spoke briefly of books. He named a few titles with ease, and his voice sounded cultured. Yet his eyes were not with the books. His eyes were with the house, with the servants. with the doors. At one point, Miss Marple said lightly, "St. Aldwyn is so quiet at night." Mr. Vale's fork paused. "Yes," he said. "Very quiet." "Quiet enough to hear footsteps," Miss Marple added gently, as if it were only an observation. Mr. Vale's eyes lifted to hers, and for the first time, Miss Marple saw something flicker beneath the control. Not panic. Not anger. Recognition. "You have a good ear, Miss Marple," he said softly. "One learns," Miss Marple replied. Mrs. Harrow's fingers went to her necklace again. Mr. Vale smiled, but his smile did not reach his eyes. "Sometimes," he said, "quiet places are not as quiet as people think." After dinner, Mrs. Harrow excused herself briefly. Miss Bracknell brought coffee. The servants moved with their usual efficiency, yet there was an extra stiffness in their bodies, as if the house itself had trained them to tread carefully. Mr. Vale stood by the window, looking out. The orchard lay dark beyond the glass. Miss Marple sat with her coffee, her posture relaxed. "You prefer the night, Mr. Vale," she said softly, not accusing, simply stating. He did not turn at once. "The night is honest," he replied after a pause. "Honest," Miss Marple repeated. "It shows you what cannot be hidden," he said. "Lights, shadows, movements." Miss Marple's voice remained calm. "And it keeps you awake," she said. He turned then, and his gaze held hers without flinching. "Sleep is a luxury, Miss Marple," he said quietly. "Some people cannot afford it." Miss Marple looked at him as if she were an old woman discussing weather, yet her mind was precise. "And the people who cannot afford it," she said, "are often those who believe someone is coming." For a moment, the room seemed to pause around them. Even the fire made less sound. Mr. Vale's expression remained controlled, but his jaw tightened. Then Mrs. Harrow returned, and the moment broke like a thin thread snapped. Mr. Vale smiled again, polite and smooth. "A most pleasant evening," he said. Miss Marple smiled back. "Yes," she replied. "Very pleasant." But as she walked home beneath the stars, the village quiet around her, she knew that the pleasantness was the most dangerous part. Because beneath the politeness, beneath the tea and the soft lamps and the careful manners, there was movement in the dark. And someone was preparing. And someone, somewhere beyond the hedges and orchard gate, was drawing nearer. And Mr. Simon Vale, the guest who never slept, intended to be awake when that person arrived. Chapter 3. The third day of Mr. Simon Vale in St. Aldwyn began with a kind of stillness that felt staged. The sky was pale and clean. The hedges looked freshly combed by the night wind. The village moved in its usual gentle rhythm. Yet Miss Marple sensed something else beneath the calm. A careful attention, a quiet listening that had begun to spread from Hawthorne House into the lanes. It was not only the late-night light now. It was the way people spoke of it. The way they lowered their voices, the way they looked up when they passed the Harrow hedge, the way they began to count hours without meaning to. Miss Marple walked after breakfast. Her pace was unhurried. Her posture was relaxed. She held her basket as if she carried nothing but thread and biscuits. But her eyes took in every small detail. At the bend near the orchard path, she saw the gate again. It was closed now. Properly. The latch looked neat, yet the wood at the edge still carried that faint scrape mark. It was the sort of mark that did not belong to Wind. Wind did not carry metal in its pocket. She did not go closer. She did not need to. Marks like that told their story simply. Someone had touched the gate with something hard. Someone had passed through. Someone had cared enough to close it again. Back in the village, she went to the grocer and then the post office. She arrived at a time when Mrs. Long was alone behind the counter. The shop smelled of paper and soap and faint, damp wool from coats hung too close together. "Good morning, Miss Marple," Mrs. Lang said with a smile that tried to look normal. "Good morning, my dear," Miss Marple replied. Mrs. Lang hesitated, then leaned in slightly, as if she could not help herself. "There was another letter," she said, "for Mr. Vale again." Again, Miss Marple repeated softly. Yes, Mrs. Lang said, and this one came early with the first post. It was marked private in large, neat capitals, not angry like the last one, not pressed hard, but too neat, if you understand me, like someone who wanted to look calm while writing. Miss Marple nodded slowly. And was it collected, she asked. Not yet. Mrs. Lang replied, Miss Bracknell has not come in. Miss Marple chose a small sheet of stamps and paid without hurry. If it is important, she will come soon, she said gently. Mrs. Lang gave a quick nod. I expect she will. As Miss Marple stepped out, she noticed a figure across the lane, near the little war memorial. Mr. Vale stood there. He was not talking to anyone. He did not appear to be waiting for a friend. He stood as if he had chosen the spot for its view. From there, one could see the lane toward Hawthorne House. One could see the road that led to the station. One could see the turn that led out of the village. He turned his head slightly, and his gaze met hers at once. It was a quick meeting of eyes, not shy, not startled, as if he had expected her to look. Miss Marple walked on. She did not cross to him. She did not greet him. She kept her pace and her calm. In a village, it was easy to appear to be doing something when one was truly watching. Near the church path, she saw Mrs. Clements. The baker wife stood with her hands on her hips, as if the day itself had annoyed her. Morning, Miss Marple, she said briskly. Good morning, Mrs. Clements, Miss Marple replied. Mrs. Clements leaned forward. He was out, she whispered. That London guest, he was out early, just after 7. I saw him on the lane by the hedge. He walked as if he knew the place already. Did he speak to you, miss? Marple asked. No, Mrs. Clements said, but he looked at the cottages, and he looked at the churchyard, and he looked at the old path by the stream, the one behind the trees. Not many people even know it is there. Miss Marple nodded. Some people notice paths, she said. Mrs. Clements sniffed. And some people notice things they should not, she replied. Miss Marple smiled gently and moved on. By late morning, she received a message from Hawthorne House. It arrived in the form of the young maid again. The girl looked flustered and eager to please. Mrs. Harrow would be grateful if you could come for a little while, the girl said. There has been a small matter. A small matter, Miss Marple repeated. Yes, miss, the girl said. She seems rather upset. Miss Marple set down her knitting. Of course, she said, I will come. Hawthorne House looked the same as always as Miss Marple approached. The hedge was clipped. The windows shone. The gravel lay smooth. Yet when she entered, she felt a faint sharpness in the air. Like a room after raised voices, even if no one had shouted. Mrs. Harrow met her in the hall. Her smile was present but thin. Her cheeks were pale beneath her powder. Her fingers moved to her necklace and then away again, as if she had told herself not to do it. Thank you for coming, Miss Marple, she said. I know it is an imposition. Not at all, Miss Marple replied. What has happened? Mrs. Harrow hesitated. It is foolish, she said, but it has unsettled me. Miss Marple waited. Mrs. Harrow drew a breath. Something has gone missing, she said, not valuable, not like the silver or anything like that, but personal. Personal, Miss Marple repeated softly. A small key, Mrs. Harrow said. A key. I keep on my ring, a little brass one. It opens a drawer in my writing desk. Miss Marple looked at her gently. When did you last see it, she asked. Last night, Mrs. Harrow replied. I am quite sure I had it last night. And now it is gone, Miss Marple said. Yes, Mrs. Harrow said. I noticed this morning when I sat to write a note. Miss Marple did not rush her. Who has access to the desk, she asked. Mrs. Harrow gave a short laugh that held no humor. In this house, she said, everyone and no one. It is in the sitting room, but servants know better than to touch it. And Mr. Vale, Miss Marple asked quietly. Mrs. Harrow stiffened. Mr. Vale would not, she said quickly. He is a guest. Guests sometimes wander, Miss Marple said gently, especially when they cannot sleep. Mrs. Harrow looked away. He has been restless, she admitted, but that does not mean he steals keys. No, Miss Marple replied, it does not mean that. They walked into the sitting room. The writing desk stood by the wall near the window. It was handsome and polished. The drawer was shut. The little keyhole looked empty and innocent. Miss Bracknell stood near the door. Her hands were clasped. Her eyes looked tired. Mr. Vale sat in a chair closer to the window. He appeared calm. His posture was composed. His clothing was perfect. Yet his gaze moved from face to face, as if measuring the room. Miss Marple greeted him politely. Mr. Vale rose and bowed his head. Miss Marple, he said, I am sorry there is trouble. It is a small matter, Miss Marple replied. Mr. Vale smiled faintly. Small matters are often the ones that reveal the most, he said. Mrs. Harrow flinched at that. Just slightly. But Miss Marple saw it. Miss Marple walked to the desk. She did not touch it at once. She looked at the surface. A blotter lay neatly in place. A pen rested, as if carefully returned. A little stack of letters sat tied with ribbon. You keep everything very tidy, Mrs. Harrow, Miss Marple said. I try, Mrs. Harrow replied. Miss Marple crouched a little. She examined the lower edge of the drawer. There was a faint mark. Not a scratch, more like a smudge of darker wood, as if a finger had pressed there. She straightened again. May I ask what is in that drawer, Miss Marple said softly. Mrs. Harrow hesitated. Old papers, she said, household things, receipts, a few letters. Mr. Vale spoke smoothly. Nothing of interest, I am sure, he said. Miss Marple turned her head slightly toward him. You are quite certain, Mr. Vale, she asked gently. His eyes met hers. I only mean that Mrs. Harrow seems a private woman. He said she would not keep anything scandalous. Miss Marple smiled. Private people keep the most interesting things, Mr. Vale, she replied. They keep them because they matter. The air tightened for a moment. Miss Bracknell looked at the floor. Mrs. Harrow's fingers hovered near her necklace, and then dropped. Miss Marple walked to the window. She looked out at the lawn. The sunlight lay softly on the grass. Nothing moved. Then she turned back and looked at Mr. Vale. You were out early this morning, she said in the tone of a simple remark. Yes, Mr. Vale replied. I like to walk when the village is quiet. You found your way easily, Miss Marple said. Mr. Vale smiled. I have a good sense of direction, he said. Mrs. Harrow spoke quickly. Mr. Vale only walked along the main lane, she said. He did not go into the house rooms or touch anything. Miss Marple did not argue. She simply shifted her attention to Miss Bracknell. Miss Bracknell, my dear, she said, could you tell me if anyone cleaned in here this morning? Miss Bracknell blinked. I did not, she said. The maid dusted as usual. Which maid? Miss Marple asked. The young one, Miss Bracknell replied Elsie. Miss Marple nodded. And did she dust the desk? Miss Marple asked. Yes, Miss Bracknell said, but only the top. She does not open drawers. Miss Marple looked back at Mrs. Harrow. May I see the key ring? You usually keep it on, she asked. Mrs. Harrow took out her keys. There were several. A house key, a small cupboard key, a garden shed key. One gap stood clear where the brass one should have been. Miss Marple touched the ring lightly. This ring has been twisted slightly, she said. Mrs. Harrow looked startled. Twisted, she repeated. Yes, Miss Marple said, the ring here is bent just a fraction. It suggests the missing key was pulled rather than slipped off. Mr. Vale's expression did not change. Keys can catch on fabric, he said calmly. Yes, Miss Marple agreed they can. She walked again to the desk. Mrs. Harrow, she said, would you mind if we check the drawer without the key? Mrs. Harrow stiffened. How, Miss Marple asked gently. There are ways. Mrs. Harrow's eyes darted to Mr. Vale and then away. If you must, she said. Miss Marple did not use force. She did not rummage. Instead, she did something small. She pressed lightly against the drawer face. Then she let go. She listened. The wood gave a tiny sound, not the sound of a locked drawer. The sound of a drawer that had been opened and shut recently. A drawer that was not stuck with age. She moved her fingertips along the edge. A thin strip of paper was caught between the drawer and the desk frame, almost invisible. The corner of it showed like a pale eyelash. Miss Marple pinched it gently and drew it free. It was not a letter. It was a small piece of thin paper with numbers written in a neat hand. Columns. Dates. A list. Mrs. Harrow's breath caught. Mr. Vale took one step forward and then stopped himself. Miss Marple held the paper in her hand as if it were nothing at all. A note, she said softly. Mrs. Harrow's face had gone still. That is not meant to be out, she said. No, Miss Marple agreed. It seems it was meant to be kept safe. Mr. Vale spoke again, and his voice remained calm, but a new edge sat beneath the words. Perhaps the maid dropped it when dusting, he said. Perhaps, Miss Marple replied, but her eyes went to his hands. His right thumb rubbed his left finger once. A small gesture. Quick. Like a man steadying himself. Miss Marple folded the paper and placed it gently on the desk. Mrs. Harrow, she said, if you will allow it, I think your missing key is not the only matter here. Mrs. Harrow's voice was tight. What do you mean, she asked. I mean, Miss Marple said softly, that someone has been into this drawer recently. Someone who was not meant to be. Mr. Vale smiled faintly. You have an imagination, Miss Marple, he said. Miss Marple looked at him with mild kindness. No, Mr. Vale, she said, I have experience. Mrs. Harrow turned to Miss Bracknell. Edith, she said sharply, have you been into that drawer? No, madam, Miss Bracknell replied at once. Mrs. Harrow turned toward Mr. Vale. Her voice remained polite, but her eyes were bright. Mr. Vale, she said, would you like to tell us anything? Mr. Vale spread his hands slightly. I know nothing of your key or your papers, he said. I have not touched your desk. Miss Marple watched him. The words were correct. The tone was correct. Yet something about his certainty felt too polished. People who told the truth often did not sound so prepared. Miss Marple placed her hand on the edge of the desk. Mrs. Harrow, she said you last saw the key last night. Yes, Mrs. Harrow replied. At what time, Miss Marple asked. Mrs. Harrow hesitated. After dinner, she said, when I locked the drawer. Locked it, Miss Marple repeated gently. Yes, Mrs. Harrow said I locked it, and I put the key back on my ring. Miss Marple nodded. And did you keep the ring with you all night, she asked. Mrs. Harrow's face changed. Only slightly. But it changed. No, she admitted, I left my keys on the hall table as usual. Miss Marple turned her gaze toward the hall. On the table by the stairs, she asked. Yes, Mrs. Harrow said. Miss Marple nodded again. Then anyone who passed through the hall at night could have taken it, she said. Mr. Vale's eyes shifted toward the hall, too. It was a brief movement. But it was enough. Mrs. Harrow's voice sharpened. Servants do not wander at night, she said. Miss Marple replied gently. No, she said, but guests who cannot sleep do. Silence settled. A soft, heavy silence. Mr. Vale gave a quiet laugh. You accuse me with a smile, he said. That is an impressive talent. Miss Marple kept her tone calm. I am not accusing you, Mr. Vale, she said. I am describing a possibility. Mrs. Harrow drew in a breath as if she had been holding it for hours. This is dreadful, she said. Miss Marple's eyes rested on the desk again. May I ask one thing, Mrs. Harrow, she said. What, Mrs. Harrow replied. Why did you invite Mr. Vale here? Mrs. Harrow's lips parted, then closed. Mr. Vale's gaze sharpened. Mrs. Harrow forced a smile. Because it was kind, she said. Miss Marple nodded slowly. Kindness can be complicated, she said quietly. The small matter in Hawthorne House had become something else. A key did not vanish for nothing. Paper did not slip free for no reason. And the way Mr. Vale watched the hall as if counting steps told Miss Marple more than any confession could. When Miss Marple left the house a little later, she did so with calm manners and gentle words. She promised Mrs. Harrow that the key might turn up. She thanked Mr. Vale for his patience. She nodded kindly to Miss Bracknell. But as she walked down the lane, she felt the pattern tighten. Mr. Vale was not only waiting for someone, he was also searching for something. That evening, the village sky dimmed into a soft gray blue. The hedges turned to shadow. Lights appeared one by one in cottage windows. The same calm scene returned. Yet Miss Marple felt the weight of the day in her thoughts. A missing key. A slip of paper with columns and dates. A guest who spoke like a man rehearsed. A hostess whose fear was polished into good manners. Miss Marple sat in the vicarage parlor with her knitting. She did not tell the vicar about the key. It would only trouble him and make him speak of it to someone else with the best intentions. The best intentions were often the quickest path to public disaster. Instead, she listened. She watched the fire. She let the evening settle. Then she excused herself and went upstairs at a reasonable time. But she did not sleep. She sat in her chair by the window, with a shawl around her shoulders. She waited in the quiet way that did not feel like waiting. Her eyes moved between the village dark and the distant shape of Hawthorne House. The upper window light came on earlier than usual tonight, as if Mr. Vale feared the dark before it even arrived. Time passed. The village became still. At a little after midnight, she saw movement again, near the orchard line. Not a clear figure, only a shift of shadow where shadow should have been steady. A soft pause. A soft continuation, like a person who knew where the ground was firm. Then a sound reached her. It was faint but clear in the village silence. A creak, the orchard gate. Miss Marple did not move. She did not open her window. She listened. A second creak followed. Slower. Careful. Then quiet. The top floor light at Hawthorne House brightened. Miss Marple watched the curtain. A shape appeared behind it. Mr. Vale again. Tall. Still. Listening. A moment later, a second light came on lower down. Not in a bedroom. In a corridor, perhaps. Or the back stair. Someone inside had begun to move. Miss Marple's mind returned to Miss Bracknell on the landing. To the back door. To the low voice. To the thud like a bag set down. Tonight it felt less like a visit, and more like a routine. A few minutes passed. Then the lower light went out again. The upper light remained steady. Miss Marple waited. No shout came. No alarm. No sudden running. Nothing dramatic. That was the most worrying part. The next morning she went out early. She took the long lane again. She walked past the orchard hedge. She did not approach the gate. She only looked. A new mark showed in the grass near the hedge line, a faint flattened patch. The kind a shoe might leave. One shoe. Then another. A careful step. Miss Marple continued on. At the post office, Mrs. Lang looked even more tired. Her eyes flicked toward the street as if she expected someone to appear. "Good morning, Miss Marple," she said quietly. "Good morning, my dear," Miss Marple replied. Mrs. Lang hesitated, then said it. "Mr. Vale came in himself last night," she said late just before closing. "Mr. Vale came in," Miss Marple repeated softly. "Yes," Mrs. Lang said. "He asked for the letter, the private one. He stood at the counter very still. As he waited for me to fetch it, he watched the door, and the window, and the mirror behind. The stamps as if he wanted to see who came in behind him. "And did he open it there?" Miss Marple asked. No, Mrs. Lang replied he put it in his pocket without looking at it. But his hand shook once, just once, then he thanked me very politely and left. Miss Marple nodded. "And did he say anything else?" she asked. Mrs. Lang lowered her voice. "He asked me a strange thing," she said. "He asked if any telegram had arrived for Mrs. Harrow this week. I told him no. Why would he ask that, Miss Marple?" Miss Marple answered gently. "Some people worry about messages," she said. Mrs. Lang looked doubtful. He was not worrying for her, she said. He was checking. Miss Marple thanked her and left. As she turned toward the green, she saw Mr. Vale again. This time he stood near the churchyard gate. Not entering, not lingering as a mourner might. He stood as if measuring the distance between the church and the lane. Then he looked directly at the vicarage, at her window line, as if he was learning where people lived. Miss Marple did not stop. She did not wave. She walked on and let him see her calm. Later in the day, she visited the small bookshop that was also a lending library. It belonged to Mr. Gerald Finch, a thin man with spectacles who remembered every title and every borrower. Villages held their histories in strange places, not only in graves and family Bibles, sometimes in borrowing records. Mr. Finch greeted Miss Marple with delight. "Ah, Miss Marple," he said, "it is a pleasure. I have just received a new set of poetry you might enjoy." "How kind," Miss Marple replied, "but I have come for something else." Mr. Finch leaned closer. "Is it the guest at Hawthorne House?" he whispered at once. Miss Marple smiled. "People are very quick, Mr. Finch," she said. Mr. Finch flushed. "Forgive me," he said, "but he came in yesterday and asked for local histories." "Local histories," Miss Marple repeated. "Yes," Mr. Finch said, "not a guidebook, not pretty pictures. He asked for parish records and old maps. I found it odd for a man here to rest." "And which records did you give him?" Miss Marple asked. Mr. Finch blinked. "The parish book from 20 years ago," he said, "the one with the names, and I lent him my copy of The Houses of St. Aldwyn. It is not popular. It lists old ownership and land boundaries." Miss Marple nodded slowly. "Did he say why he wanted them?" she asked. "He said he liked to understand where he was staying," Mr. Finch replied, "but he asked questions too. He asked about the Harrow family. He asked about Mr. Harrow, who died last year. He asked about his business connections in London." Mr. Finch lowered his voice. "Then he asked about an old dispute," he said. "I did not even know there was one. He said, was there ever trouble over Hawthorne land near the orchard?" I told him I had heard a rumor about a boundary issue long ago, but I did not know details. Miss Marple felt the pattern tighten again. "A boundary issue," she repeated softly. "Yes," Mr. Finch said, "it was years ago. I think there was talk of a right-of-way, but it faded." Then he smiled and thanked me as if it was nothing. Miss Marple selected a small book to borrow and thanked Mr. Finch. As she left, she knew something important. Mr. Vale was not only waiting. He was building a map, not of roads only, of history, of ownership, of rights, of who could pass through a gate and claim they had every reason to be there. In the afternoon, she returned to Hawthorne House by invitation. Mrs. Harrow had requested tea again. This time there was a brittle brightness to her manner, as if she had decided that if she smiled enough, nothing could crack. Mr. Vale sat with them. Miss Bracknell poured tea with hands steady, but eyes tired. The air held that same sharpness. Not anger, not noise, only strain. Mrs. Harrow spoke quickly. "I am sure it was only misplaced," she said, "about the key. Elsie may have moved it without thinking." Miss Marple nodded politely. "That is possible," she said. Mr. Vale's gaze remained on Miss Marple. "I hope you did not think badly of us yesterday," he said softly. "Not at all, Mr. Vale," Miss Marple replied. He smiled. "You have a great reputation for noticing things," he said. "People say you see what others overlook." Miss Marple smiled gently. "People say many things," she replied. Mr. Vale leaned forward slightly. "Then allow me to ask you something," he said. Mrs. Harrow stiffened at once. "Simon," she began. Mr. Vale lifted one hand as if to calm her. "It is harmless," he said. Miss Marple waited. Mr. Vale's eyes held hers. "Do you believe a person can vanish in plain sight?" he asked quietly. Mrs. Harrow's teacup trembled, just a fraction. Miss Marple spoke calmly. "People vanish in villages all the time," she said. "They vanish inside good manners, inside silence, inside routines." Mr. Vale watched her closely. "And do you believe a secret can be kept in a house without the house knowing it?" he asked. Miss Marple sipped her tea. "A house knows everything," she replied. "It knows where feet walk at night. It knows which doors open. It knows which drawers are disturbed." Mr. Vale's smile thinned. "Then you will understand," he said, "that I prefer to keep the lights on." Mrs. Harrow's voice turned sharp. "Because you do not sleep," she said. Mr. Vale turned his gaze to her. His tone remained soft. But it carried weight. "Because I cannot afford to," he replied. Silence fell. Miss Marple placed her cup down gently. "Mr. Vale," she said, "may I ask you something in return?" He nodded. "Do you know what was in that drawer Mrs. Harrow tried to keep locked?" she asked. Mr. Vale did not blink. "No," he said. Miss Marple held his gaze. "Then how did you know it mattered?" she asked. For the first time he hesitated, only for the length of a breath. But it was there. Then he smiled again. "Because Mrs. Harrow is frightened," he said, "and frightened people lock what frightens them." Mrs. Harrow stood up so quickly her chair scraped. "That is enough," she said. Mr. Vale rose too at once. "Lucy," he said gently. Mrs. Harrow's voice shook. "You said you came for rest," she said, "but you watch and you ask and you walk at night, and now keys go missing." Mr. Vale's face remained composed. "You invited me here," he said. Mrs. Harrow's fingers went to her necklace. She gripped it. "Yes," she said, "and I regret it." Miss Bracknell stepped forward, with a soft, pleading sound. "Please, madam," she said. Mrs. Harrow turned away. "Tea is finished," she said sharply. Miss Marple rose calmly. "Thank you for the tea, Mrs. Harrow," she said. Mrs. Harrow did not respond. She stood with her back half-turned, as if she could not bear to look at either of them. Mr. Vale bowed his head to Miss Marple. "Good day, Miss Marple," he said. "Good day, Mr. Vale," she replied. As she walked out through the hall, her eyes fell on the table by the stairs where Mrs. Harrow kept her keys. The table was neat. A vase sat there. A small bowl for coins. Everything in order. Yet Miss Marple noticed one more thing. A new key lay in the bowl. A small brass key. Not on the ring. Not returned where it belonged. Placed there as if someone wanted it to be found. Or wanted someone to know it could have been returned at any time. Miss Marple did not touch it. She did not point. She simply carried the image in her mind as she walked down the gravel path. The missing key was no longer missing. That meant the taking had been deliberate. And the returning had been deliberate too. Mr. Vale had been sending a message. Not only to Mrs. Harrow. To someone else. Someone who would understand that the house had been tested. Someone who was still out there in the quiet lanes. Someone who would come again. And when that person came, Mr. Vale planned to be awake, because the guest who never slept was not simply afraid of the night. He was shaping the night into a trap. Chapter 4. St Aldwyn woke under a thin veil of mist the next morning. It was not heavy enough to hide the cottages, only enough to soften them, as if the village had been rubbed gently with a cloth. The hedges looked blurred at the edges. The lane held a damp sheen. Sounds carried oddly, closer than they should. Miss Marple liked mist. It made people speak more quietly, as if they were afraid their words might travel too far. She sat at the vicarage breakfast table with her tea and toast, and listened to the vicar describe an upcoming visit from the bishop. It was the sort of news that made him sit up straighter. Miss Marple smiled politely and agreed at the proper times, but her mind was on the small brass key she had seen in the bowl at Hawthorne House. Returned, not slipped back in embarrassment, not found beneath a cushion, not discovered by a maid. Placed. A deliberate returning was a kind of communication. It said, I can take what you guard, and I can give it back when I choose. After breakfast, Miss Marple took her walk. She kept her pace gentle. Her hands were gloved, her basket light. She did not look like a woman going toward trouble. She looked like a woman going toward fresh air. Near the corner by the green, she saw Mr. Gerald Finch coming out of his little bookshop. He carried a parcel under one arm and looked pleased with himself. When he noticed Miss Marple, he hurried closer. Miss Marple, he said. Good morning. I meant to find you. Did you, Mr. Finch? Miss Marple replied warmly. He lowered his voice. It is that gentleman from Hawthorne House, he whispered. Mr. Vale. He returned my book last night. Returned it, Miss Marple repeated. Yes, Mr. Finch said, and his eyes shone with the thrill of being included in something. He brought it to my door just after 9. Not at the shop. To my door. He apologized for disturbing me, very polite. Then, he asked me something else. What did he ask? Miss Marple said gently. Mr. Finch looked around as if the mist might be listening. He asked if there was any old tunnel or cellar beneath Hawthorne House, he said. Can you imagine? He said some houses of that age have old passages. I told him I had never heard such a thing, but he looked as if he hoped there was. Miss Marple nodded slowly. Some people enjoy old stories, she said. Mr. Finch frowned. It did not feel like enjoyment, he said. It felt like searching. Searching for what? Miss Marple asked softly, though she already suspected. Mr. Finch hesitated. He asked about the former owner, Mr. Harrow's father, he said. He asked if the man had kept anything valuable. Papers. Documents. Anything that might be hidden. Miss Marple's voice remained mild. And what did you tell him, Mr. Finch? Only that I did not know, Mr. Finch replied. But I did mention, perhaps foolishly, that there had once been talk of an old safe in the house, a built-in thing in the study wall. I heard it years ago from my aunt. It might be nonsense. Miss Marple felt a small tightening in her thoughts. An old safe, she repeated. Yes, Mr. Finch said. And do you know what he said then? He said that would explain the key. Miss Marple's expression did not change, but inside, her mind caught hold of the words. That would explain the key. Mr. Finch leaned closer, pleased to repeat it. He said it so calmly he continued, as if he already knew a key was missing, as if he already knew what it might open. Then he thanked me and went away. Miss Marple smiled gently. Thank you, Mr. Finch, she said. That is most interesting. Mr. Finch beamed. Do you think something dreadful is happening? He whispered. Miss Marple kept her voice light. In villages, Mr. Finch, dreadful things usually arrive wearing ordinary clothes, she said. Good day. She walked on, her steps calm, but her mind sharp. If Mr. Vale had said that would explain the key, he had known the key mattered. He had known it was connected to something hidden, something locked, something worth taking or protecting. Mrs. Harrow had claimed the brass key opened a drawer in her writing desk. That might be true. It might also be only part of the truth. People often offered one correct detail to hide another. Miss Marple continued toward Hawthorne House, not by invitation, but by chance, as if her feet had simply carried her that way. Near the hedge, she saw Mrs. Reed again, standing outside her cottage with a shawl wrapped tight. Morning, Miss Marple, Mrs. Reed said at once. Did you hear? Hear what? Miss Marple asked, mild as ever. Mrs. Reed's eyes widened. There was a noise in the night, she whispered. Not the gate this time. A different sound. Like metal. Like someone scraping something heavy. Miss Marple nodded gently. From Hawthorne House, she asked. Mrs. Reed nodded. Yes, she said, around 1. Then the upstairs light went so bright, it looked like a hospital. And then there was a thump. Not a loud crash. A dull thump, as if something heavy was set down carefully. Miss Marple's mind pictured the thud Miss Bracknell had heard before. A bag. A case. Something carried in, not out. And did you see anyone? Miss Marple asked. Mrs. Reed shook her head. No, she said. But I saw the servant girl, Elsie, at dawn. She went out to the bins and she looked frightened. She kept looking at the orchard as if she expected someone to step out of it. Miss Marple thanked her and moved on. When she reached Hawthorne House, the front door opened before she could ring. Miss Bracknell stood there, as if she had been watching for her. Her face looked paler than usual. Her eyes carried the kind of tiredness that did not come from work alone. Miss Marple, Miss Bracknell said quickly, I am glad you are here. Is something the matter? Miss Marple asked softly. Miss Bracknell hesitated, then stepped aside. Please come in, she said. Mrs. Harrow is in the morning room. She is not well. Miss Marple entered. The hall smelled faintly of polish and something sharper beneath, like cold stone. The house was quiet. Not a peaceful quiet. A held breath. In the morning room, Mrs. Harrow sat by the window with a cup of tea untouched. Her posture was straight, but her hands trembled as they rested in her lap. Mr. Vale stood near the fireplace. His shoulders relaxed, his expression composed. He looked as if he had slept well, which was in itself unsettling. Miss Marple greeted them and took the chair offered. Mrs. Harrow tried to smile. Miss Marple, she said. Thank you for coming. I did not send for you, but Edith said. Miss Bracknell hovered near the door like a loyal guard. Mrs. Harrow drew a breath. There has been another incident, she said. Mr. Vale spoke smoothly. A misunderstanding, he said. Nothing more. Mrs. Harrow's eyes flashed, and for a moment her control slipped. It is not a misunderstanding, she said. It is my house. Mr. Vale's expression remained mild. Of course, he replied. Miss Marple's tone was gentle. Tell me what happened, she said. Mrs. Harrow's voice shook slightly. I went into my study this morning, she said, and the panel behind the bookshelf, the one my husband had installed, it was open. Miss Marple's eyes sharpened. A panel, she repeated. Yes, Mrs. Harrow said. It hides a small safe. An old one. It was here before we bought the house. My husband had it checked years ago. It is mostly useless. The key has been missing for ages. But he kept it anyway. He liked secrets, I suppose. Mr. Vale's gaze remained on Mrs. Harrow's face. The panel was open. Mrs. Harrow continued. And the safe door, it had marks on it, scratches. As if someone tried to force it. Miss Marple turned her gaze toward Mr. Vale, but her expression stayed kind. And who knew this safe existed, she asked. Mrs. Harrow swallowed. Very few, she said. My husband, Edith. And Mr. Vale now, because I mentioned it yesterday when we argued. Mr. Vale's smile was faint. You see, he said, it is not mystery. It is conversation. Miss Marple looked at Mrs. Harrow. Did you see anything missing? She asked. Mrs. Harrow shook her head. The safe is still locked, she said. Nothing could be missing. But someone has tried to open it. Miss Marple folded her hands. Then someone wants what is inside, she said softly. Mr. Vale's voice was calm. Or someone wants to frighten Mrs. Harrow, he said. Mrs. Harrow's eyes filled with anger. You speak as if you are separate from it, she said. Mr. Vale's gaze turned steady. I am separate, he replied. I have done nothing. Miss Marple kept her tone gentle. May I see the safe? She asked. Mrs. Harrow hesitated, then nodded. Edith, she said. Show Miss Marple. Miss Bracknell led Miss Marple through the hall to the study. The room smelled of leather and old books. The desk stood by the window. The bookshelf in the corner looked ordinary. But when Miss Bracknell pressed a hidden latch, the shelf shifted slightly, revealing a narrow panel. Behind it was a small safe set into the wall. The safe door was old, dark metal with a keyhole in the center. Around the edges were faint scrape marks, the kind made by tools applied with care. Not the frantic scratches of a thief in a hurry, the measured marks of a person testing. Miss Marple leaned closer. She did not touch the scratches. She studied them. This was done at night, she said softly. Miss Bracknell's voice was low. Yes, she said. I heard something. Like metal on metal. Miss Marple looked at the safe keyhole. You said the key has been missing for ages, she murmured. Mrs. Harrow stood behind her, her breath tight. Yes, she said. It disappeared years ago. My husband said it must have been lost. We never bothered to replace it. Miss Marple straightened and turned. And yet yesterday, Mrs. Harrow, you said the missing brass key opened your desk drawer, she said gently. Mrs. Harrow's face tightened. It does, she replied quickly. And does it also fit this safe? Miss Marple asked. Mrs. Harrow's gaze flicked away. No, she said at once. No. The safe key was different. Mr. Vale spoke from the doorway, his voice mild. Mrs. Harrow might not remember after all these years, he said. Keys can look similar. Miss Marple's eyes rested on him. Some keys are similar, she said. But people usually remember the key that hides what they fear. Mr. Vale's smile did not change. Do they? He asked. Miss Marple turned back to the safe. The scratches are fresh, she said calmly. Someone has been trying to open this recently. But if the key is missing, they might have been testing another key. Seeing if it fits. Miss Bracknell swallowed. You mean the brass key? She whispered. Miss Marple nodded gently. It is possible, she said. Mrs. Harrow's voice rose, though she tried to keep it controlled. No, she said. That key is for my drawer. Miss Marple did not argue. Instead, she reached into her pocket and drew out a small piece of folded paper, the slip that had been caught in the desk drawer edge. She had asked Mrs. Harrow's permission to keep it for a moment, and Mrs. Harrow, in her upset, had agreed without thinking. She unfolded it now. These numbers, she said softly. These dates. They are not household receipts. Mrs. Harrow's face went pale. Put that away, she said. Mr. Vale's eyes sharpened. Miss Marple, he said softly, you are prying. Miss Marple's voice remained calm. I am observing, she replied. There is a difference. She looked at the paper again. This looks like a schedule, she said. A list of payments, or deliveries, or meetings. There is a pattern. Every third day. Small amounts, then a larger sum. Mrs. Harrow's lips parted. You do not understand, she said. Mr. Vale stepped closer. Or perhaps she understands perfectly, he said quietly. The air in the study felt tighter now, not because of raised voices, because of the truth pressing close. Miss Marple folded the paper again and returned it to her pocket. I do not need to understand everything today, she said softly. I only need to know why someone is awake at night, moving through your house, trying to open a safe that has been locked for years. Mrs. Harrow's eyes filled. She seemed near breaking. But she held herself together. Mr. Vale's gaze remained steady. It is not someone moving through the house, he said. It is me. I walk because I cannot sleep. I look because I must. And if the safe matters, it matters because it is connected to me, whether you like it or not. Mrs. Harrow whispered, stop. Miss Marple watched him carefully. Connected to you, she repeated gently. He did not answer. But in that brief silence, the weight of his sleeplessness changed. It was no longer only fear. It was possession. Claim. Determination. Miss Marple turned away from the safe and looked at Mrs. Harrow. The house knows more than you think, she said softly. And so does the village. Mrs. Harrow closed her eyes as if the words hurt. Outside, in the misty morning, St Aldwyn continued its routines. But inside Hawthorne House, the secret safe in the wall had been awakened, and someone, awake in the night, had begun to treat that safe as a door. Miss Marple left the study with the same calm manners she always carried. She did not slam doors. She did not accuse. She did not demand explanations. She thanked Mrs. Harrow for showing her the safe, and she excused herself with gentle words about not tiring her. Yet as she walked back through the hall, she noticed something else. A faint smear on the polished floor near the back stair. Not mud. Not a shoe print. More like a fine metallic dust, as if something had been ground or filed, and a few specks had fallen. It was so small most people would never have seen it. But Miss Marple's eyes were trained by years of watching women scrub floors and men bring in coal. Metal dust did not belong on a staircase unless metal had been worked nearby. She did not bend down. She did not touch it. She simply stored it away. Outside, the mist had lifted a little. The village looked clearer. Hawthorne House looked less like a dream, and more like a solid place where things could happen. Miss Marple walked home. At the vicarage, she sat with her knitting and let time pass. There was nothing to be gained by rushing. Secrets did not open to force. They opened to patience. In the late afternoon, as the sky turned pale gold, Miss Marple received a small note delivered by hand. It was from Miss Bracknell. The handwriting was neat but hurried. Please come this evening after dinner if you can. There is something I must show you. Edith. Miss Marple folded the note calmly. After dinner, she told the vicar she wished to take a short walk. The vicar nodded and reminded her to take her shawl. He never imagined that shawls were sometimes worn for more than warmth. The village was quiet when she walked. Lights glowed in cottage windows. A faint smell of stew drifted from somewhere. A dog barked once, then stopped, as if remembering the village rule of quiet. At Hawthorne House, Miss Bracknell met her at the side door, not the front. Her face was pale. "Thank you," she whispered. Miss Marple followed her inside. The house was dimmer than usual, as if Mrs. Harrow wished to keep everything subdued. Yet the upstairs light, the one in Mr. Vale's room, still burned, steady and bright. Miss Bracknell noticed Miss Marple looking. "He is awake," she whispered. "He has been awake since before dawn." They moved softly through the corridor toward the kitchen area, away from the main rooms. Miss Bracknell led Miss Marple into a small pantry where the smell of flour and dried herbs filled the air. She closed the door carefully. "Miss Marple," she said, and her voice shook slightly. "I found something in the back stair cupboard. I think he hid it there last night." Miss Marple's tone remained gentle. "Show me, my dear," she said. Miss Bracknell opened a small cupboard and drew out a cloth bundle. Her hands trembled as she unwrapped it. Inside was a thin metal tool, not a kitchen implement, not something for gardening. It was narrow and hard, with a flat end, like a small pry tool. Beside it lay a file. A fine file, the sort used to shape metal precisely. Miss Marple looked at them without touching. "Tools," she said softly. Miss Bracknell nodded. "I swept the back stair this morning," she whispered. "I saw that metallic dust. I thought perhaps it was from an old hinge. But then I found this tucked behind the cleaning rags." Miss Marple's mind returned to the smear of dust she had noticed. "And you believe it belongs to Mr. Vale," she said. Miss Bracknell swallowed. "I do," she replied. "He asked for thin cord and oil and a torch. Now tools. He is not only waiting, he is doing something." Miss Marple nodded slowly. "Has Mrs. Harrow seen these?" she asked. "No," Miss Bracknell whispered. "I do not dare show her. She will either faint or she will scream. And if she screams, he will know I am watching." Miss Marple's voice remained calm. "You are right not to confront him alone," she said. Miss Bracknell looked near tears. "What shall we do?" she asked. Miss Marple considered. We will not accuse him, she said. Not without proof, but we can observe more closely. And we can remove what he might use. Miss Bracknell nodded quickly, relief flickering. Yes, she whispered. Miss Marple reached into her bag and produced a small handkerchief. With careful fingers, she picked up the file and tool using the cloth, leaving no clear marks of her own. She rewrapped them and handed them back. Hide them somewhere he cannot reach, she said softly. Somewhere only you know. Not in your room. Somewhere mundane. A place he will not search because it is too ordinary. Miss Bracknell nodded. The flower bin, she whispered. That would do, Miss Marple replied. Miss Bracknell hesitated. There is more, she whispered. More, Miss Marple repeated. Miss Bracknell looked toward the pantry door as if afraid it might open. Last night, she said. I heard him again at the back door. And I heard another voice. A man's voice, but this time I caught a word. A word, Miss Marple asked gently. Yes, Miss Bracknell said. The man said, tomorrow. And then he said, bring it. Miss Marple's gaze sharpened. Bring it, she repeated softly. Miss Bracknell nodded. I do not know what it means, she whispered. But it frightened me. Miss Marple's mind moved quickly, but her face stayed calm. It suggests someone expects something from him, she said. Miss Bracknell's eyes widened. Do you think the person wants whatever is in the safe? She whispered. Miss Marple did not answer directly. What is in the safe? She asked instead. Have you ever seen it opened? Miss Bracknell shook her head. Never, she said. Mr. Harrow said it was old and useless. But Mrs. Harrow always looked uncomfortable when it was mentioned, as if she feared it. Miss Marple nodded. Fear often points to value, she said softly. Not always money. Sometimes shame. Sometimes evidence. Miss Bracknell clasped her hands. Miss Marple, she whispered, I am afraid something will happen tonight. Miss Marple's tone remained gentle. Then we will be awake, she said. Miss Bracknell stared. You mean, you will stay? She whispered. No, Miss Marple replied. I cannot stay without being noticed. But I will not be asleep. I will watch from the vicarage window again. And you, my dear, will do one thing. Miss Bracknell leaned in. What? She asked. You will make sure the back stair cupboard is empty, Miss Marple said. And you will listen. Not in fear, but in observation. If you hear that voice again, try to catch another word. Miss Bracknell nodded, swallowing. Yes, she whispered. Miss Marple touched her hand briefly, steadying. Now take me out as quietly as you brought me in, she said. We must not give him any reason to suspect. Miss Bracknell led her to the side door again. As Miss Marple stepped outside, she glanced up once more. The upstairs window light burned. A shadow moved behind the curtain. Mr. Vale was there, watching the darkening garden as if it were a stage. Miss Marple returned to the vicarage. She said goodnight to the vicar and retired to her room. She sat by the window again, shawl around her shoulders, hands folded. The night settled. At 11:30, the village became still. At midnight, the orchard gate creaked. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed slightly. She watched the line of hedge. She could not see the gate itself from this distance, but she could sense the moment the silence changed. A dark shape moved near the back of Hawthorne House again. Brief. Low, then gone. The upstairs light brightened. A lower light came on near the back stair. Minutes passed. Then, from the stillness, Miss Marple saw something she had not seen before. A small beam of light. Not from a lamp, from a torch. It moved across the inside of the study window on the ground floor. A quick sweep. Left. Right. Then stopped. Someone was in the study. Miss Marple's breath remained steady. The torch beam returned, slower now, focused. It lingered near the bookshelf area. Then vanished. A dull thump followed. Not loud. careful, like something heavy being shifted. Then silence again. The torch beam did not return. The back stair light went out. The upstairs light remained. Miss Marple sat still for a long time after that, listening to the village hush as if it could speak. She did not know what had been moved in that study. She did not know what had been brought, or what had been taken. But she knew this. The safe was being worked on, and tonight, someone had been inside Hawthorne House with a torch and purpose. The guest who never slept was no longer only watching. He was acting. And somewhere outside the hedges, someone else was involved. Because a man does not say tomorrow and bring it unless there is an agreement. And agreements made in the dark rarely end in peace. Miss Marple remained by the window until the first faint, pale line of dawn began to soften the horizon. Only then did she rise and move away. Because in St Aldwyn, the morning would arrive with the usual sounds. But the night had left marks, and the house, with its hidden safe and scraped metal, had begun to speak. Chapter 5. Dawn arrived in St Aldwyn with a softness that felt almost improper after the night. The mist returned in thin threads, drifting low across the lane, settling into hollows like quiet breath. Birds began their early calling as if nothing had happened. A milk cart rattled somewhere far off. The village dressed itself again in routine, and routine was always persuasive. Miss Marple did not allow routine to persuade her. She rose, washed, dressed, and sat at the little writing table by her window for a moment, hands folded. Across the village, Hawthorne House stood still. The upstairs light was finally out. That meant only that someone had chosen to stop being visible. It did not mean the danger had passed. At breakfast, the vicar mentioned a new complaint about the church roof. Miss Marple listened, nodded, smiled. When he went out to make calls, she took her basket and stepped into the lane. She walked first to the post office. The bell above the door sounded too cheerful. Mrs. Lang looked up with eyes that had not slept properly. "Good morning, Miss Marple," she said, and tried to make her voice ordinary. "Good morning, my dear," Miss Marple replied. Mrs. Lang hesitated, then spoke at once as if the words were pressing to escape. "There was a man here last night," she whispered. "Not Mr. Vale. Another man. He came just before closing and asked if I had delivered a letter to Hawthorne House. He did not give a name. He said it in a way that made it sound like he expected me to be afraid." Miss Marple's face remained gentle. "And what did you say?" she asked softly. "I said I deliver letters," Mrs. Lang replied. "That is what I do." Then he smiled. But it was not a friendly smile. He said, "Tell Mr. Vale I will be in the village today." Miss Marple felt the pattern tighten and pull. "He said, Mr. Vale," she repeated. "Yes," Mrs. Lang whispered. Just like that, as if everyone knew Mr. Vale and him were connected. Then he left. I watched him from the window. He walked toward the green, slow and sure, like a man who belonged. Miss Marple nodded slowly. "Can you describe him, my dear?" she asked. Mrs. Lang swallowed. "Not tall," she said. "Average. Dark coat. Dark hair. A hat pulled low, but the way he walked? Miss Marple. No hurry. No caution. Like someone who was not afraid of being seen." Miss Marple thanked her, purchased a few small items she did not need, and stepped outside. The village green lay ahead, damp and bright. As she walked toward it, she saw Mr. Vale already there. He stood near the bench where old Mr. Pritchard often sat, though Mr. Pritchard was not there this morning. Mr. Vale's posture was perfectly composed. He looked as if he were simply enjoying air and space. Yet his gaze kept flicking toward the road that led out of the village. Waiting. Miss Marple did not approach him. She moved instead toward the churchyard, where she could observe without being obvious. She stood by a gravestone and pretended to read the name. A little later, a figure appeared on the road, walking in with calm purpose. Dark coat. Hat low, not tall. Average. Mrs. Lang's stranger. He crossed the green at an angle that would bring him directly to Mr. Vale. He did not glance about like a visitor. He did not slow to admire anything. He moved straight toward his destination. Miss Marple watched both men. Mr. Vale did not appear surprised. He shifted his stance slightly, as if preparing. The newcomer stopped a short distance away. They did not shake hands. They did not smile. They spoke briefly. Their heads leaned close, not in friendship, but in privacy. Then the newcomer handed Mr. Vale something, a small item, no larger than a folded letter. Mr. Vale slipped it into his pocket. His face remained calm. But Miss Marple saw the tension in his jaw. The newcomer gestured once toward Hawthorne House. Mr. Vale nodded. The newcomer then walked away, not toward the road back out, but toward the lane that led behind the cottages and toward the orchard boundary. Miss Marple's mind sharpened. He was going toward the back, toward the gate, toward the place where night visitors moved. Miss Marple waited until he had passed out of view, then she walked with calm purpose toward Mrs. Reed's cottage. Mrs. Reed was already outside, as if she could not bear to remain indoors with so much possibility in the air. Miss Marple, Mrs. Reed whispered the moment she saw her. "Did you see him?" "I saw someone," Miss Marple replied gently. Mrs. Reed's eyes were wide with that mixture of fear and excitement villages often produced. "He is not from here," she said. "I know every man in these lanes." "That one is not ours." "No," Miss Marple agreed. "And he went toward the orchard path," Mrs. Reed added. Like he knew it. Miss Marple nodded. "Did anyone else see him?" she asked. Mrs. Reed lowered her voice even more. "The gardener at Hawthorne House," she said. "Mr. Dawes. He saw him. He came to the fence and watched him go past. Then he hurried back into the harrow grounds, like he meant to tell someone." Miss Marple felt the day click into a new shape. If the gardener had seen him, it meant the house would soon know. And if the house knew, it would either tighten its doors or it would crack open under pressure. Miss Marple returned to the vicarage, not to hide, but to choose her next step with care. She sat at the parlor window with her knitting and waited. By late morning, a message arrived from Hawthorne House. This time it was not delivered by the maid. It was delivered by the gardener himself, Mr. Dawes, a sturdy man with dirt under his nails and worry on his brow. "Miss Marple," he said. "Mrs. Harrow asks if you will come at once. There is trouble." Miss Marple rose at once. "Of course," she said. "Tell her I am coming." At Hawthorne House, the atmosphere was different. It was no longer only tense, it was sharp, as if something had broken quietly and left edges. Mrs. Harrow met Miss Marple in the morning room. Her face was pale. Her eyes were fierce. She held herself upright by will alone. "He is here," she said without greeting. "Who is here?" Miss Marple asked gently. "That man," Mrs. Harrow whispered. "The one from London. He is on my property." Miss Marple's voice remained calm. "Where?" she asked. Mrs. Harrow pointed toward the garden beyond the window. "Near the orchard," she said. "He is speaking to Mr. Vale. And Mr. Vale is letting him." "As if he has a right," Miss Marple murmured. Mrs. Harrow's hands clenched. "I want him gone," she said. "But Mr. Vale says I must not make a scene. He says it would be dangerous." "Dangerous," Miss Marple repeated softly. Mrs. Harrow looked at her with sudden desperation. "You have to tell me what is happening," she said. "I am being used in my own home." Miss Marple considered her words carefully. "Mrs. Harrow," she said gently, "when you invited Mr. Vale here, what did he tell you?" Mrs. Harrow's lips trembled. "He said he needed a place to disappear for a few days," she said. "He said someone was pressuring him. He said he feared for his life, Miss Marple. I could not turn him away." "And what did he give you in exchange?" Miss Marple asked softly. Mrs. Harrow stiffened. "Nothing," she said quickly. Miss Marple's eyes stayed kind. Did he promise you something? She asked. Mrs. Harrow's gaze dropped. He said, she whispered. He said if I helped him, he would finally settle something my husband left unfinished. He said he could clear a debt, a matter that would otherwise become public. Miss Marple nodded slowly. A matter connected to the safe, perhaps, she said gently. Mrs. Harrow flinched as if struck. How do you know about the safe? She whispered. Because he is trying to open it, Miss Marple replied calmly, and because someone else has come for what is inside. Mrs. Harrow's breath came fast. What is inside? She whispered. I do not know. My husband would not tell me. He said it was insurance, something to protect us if certain men became difficult. He said it was better I did not know. Miss Marple's tone remained soft. Men often say that, she replied. It is rarely for a woman's comfort. It is usually for a man's pride. Mrs. Harrow's eyes filled. I have been frightened for a year, she whispered, since my husband died. Letters came. Men called. I told them we knew nothing. Then Mr. Vale wrote, saying he could help, that he could keep them away if I gave him a few days in the house. I thought it was a miracle. Miss Marple nodded. Miracles often come with strings, she said quietly. Outside, near the orchard, Miss Marple could see two men moving. Mr. Vale and the stranger. They were not arguing. They were speaking with controlled tension. At one point, the stranger lifted his hand and pointed toward the study wing. Mr. Vale shook his head slightly. Then he said something, and the stranger's posture stiffened. Mrs. Harrow gripped the back of a chair. They want something, she whispered. They want something my husband hid. Miss Marple looked at her steadily. And you have a key that may open it, she said softly. Mrs. Harrow's face went pale. No, she whispered. No, that key is only for the desk drawer. Miss Marple's gaze was unwavering but gentle. Then why did it disappear and return like a message? She asked. Why did Mr. Vale speak of a safe key to Mr. Finch? Why does another man come into your orchard and say, bring it? Mrs. Harrow's hands began to tremble again. Because, she whispered. Because I lied. Miss Marple did not move. Tell me, Mrs. Harrow, she said softly. Mrs. Harrow swallowed, then spoke in a rush, as if she feared she might not manage if she paused. That brass key, she said. It does open the desk drawer, but it also fits the safe. My husband showed me once. He made me swear never to touch it. He said if anything happened to him, I must never let anyone know I had it. He said it was the only thing keeping us safe. Miss Marple nodded slowly. And now, she said, two men believe you have it. Mrs. Harrow's eyes squeezed shut. Yes, she whispered. And Mr. Vale believes he can take it from me. Miss Marple's voice remained calm. Where is the key now, Mrs. Harrow? Mrs. Harrow's hand went to her necklace, and then dropped as if she hated the habit. I hid it, she whispered. In the sewing box. Under the false lining. My mother taught me how. I hid it the day Mr. Vale arrived, because I did not trust him, even then. Miss Marple nodded gently. That was wise, she said. Mrs. Harrow looked at her with sudden fear. But what do I do now? She whispered. He is in my house. That other man is here. If they find it, what will happen? Miss Marple considered. We do not give it to them, she said softly, and we do not panic. Panic makes people careless. Mrs. Harrow's breath shook. They will search, she whispered. Yes, Miss Marple replied. They will. At that moment, Miss Bracknell entered quickly, closing the door behind her. Miss Marple, she whispered. Mr. Vale is coming inside. He asked that Mrs. Harrow join them in the study. The other man is waiting near the panel. Mrs. Harrow's face drained. He wants the safe, she whispered. Miss Marple rose calmly. Then we will go, she said. Mrs. Harrow stared. You will come with me, she whispered. Yes, Miss Marple replied. Not as a fighter. As a witness. Men behave differently when they know they are observed. Miss Bracknell's eyes filled with relief. "Thank you," she whispered. They moved together through the hall toward the study wing. Miss Marple's steps were steady, her shoulders relaxed. She did not look like a person entering danger. She looked like a person entering a drawing room. Yet her mind was bright and prepared, because the pattern had finally revealed its shape. The sleepless guest had not come to hide. He had come to claim, and the man from London had come to collect. Whatever lay behind that safe door had become the center of a quiet struggle. And now, at last, the struggle would step into daylight. The study at Hawthorne House felt colder than the rest of the house, though a small fire burned in the grate. It was a room made for control. Heavy curtains, dark wood, books arranged with care, a desk that faced the window like a judge. Even the air smelled of leather and old ink. Mr. Simon Vale stood near the bookshelf panel, his hands at his sides, his expression perfectly composed. Beside him stood the other man. He had removed his hat now. His hair was neatly cut. His face was ordinary enough that one might forget it after looking away, which made it dangerous. His eyes, however, were sharp and restless. When Miss Marple entered behind Mrs. Harrow and Miss Bracknell, both men turned at once. Mr. Vale's eyes flicked to Miss Marple, with a faint tightening. "Miss Marple," he said softly, "I did not expect you." "No," Miss Marple replied gently. "Life is full of small surprises." The stranger looked her up and down without politeness. "And who is this?" he asked. "A friend of the household," Mr. Vale said smoothly. Miss Marple smiled faintly. "A guest of the vicarage," she corrected calmly. The stranger gave a short laugh. "Charming," he said. "But this is private business. Private business in someone else's house," Miss Marple replied softly, "is often called something else." Mr. Vale stepped slightly toward her, a mild warning in his eyes. "Miss Marple," he said, "please. We are trying to avoid disturbance." Mrs. Harrow's voice trembled. "Disturbance," she repeated. "You brought a stranger into my orchard." The stranger's smile was thin. "Do not pretend innocence, Mrs. Harrow," he said. "Your husband knew perfectly well what he was doing." Mrs. Harrow's face flushed. "My husband is dead," she said. "Exactly," the stranger replied. "Which is why we are here." Mr. Vale lifted his hand in a calming gesture. "Let us not raise voices," he said. "There is no need for drama. We only want what we came for. And then we will leave you in peace." "Peace," Mrs. Harrow whispered, and she looked as if the word tasted bitter. Miss Marple stepped forward slightly, her voice mild. "Perhaps it would help if you told us your name," she said to the stranger. The stranger's eyes narrowed. "Names are unnecessary," he said. "Not in villages," Miss Marple replied gently. "In villages, names are the first truth." Mr. Vale spoke quickly. "This is Mr. Carow," he said, "an associate of my former employer." Mr. Carrow's mouth tightened at the word associate, but he did not correct it. Mr. Vale turned to Mrs. Harrow. "Lucy," he said softly, "you have kept something that does not belong to you. Your husband kept it. He meant to use it as leverage. That is a dangerous game. We are here to end it. Give us the key, and we will open the safe and take what is inside. Then we will be gone." Mrs. Harrow's hands clenched. "No," she said. "I will not." Mr. Carow stepped closer. His voice dropped, and though it was quiet, it carried menace like cold water. "Do not be foolish," he said. "We have been patient. Your husband was stubborn. We can be patient with widows, too. But patience ends." Miss Bracknell made a small sound, almost a sob. Miss Marple's voice remained calm. "What is inside the safe, Mr. Carow?" she asked. Mr. Carow glanced at her with irritation. "Not your concern," he said. Mr. Vale answered instead, his tone smooth. "Documents," he said. "Papers that should never have been kept here. Papers that could harm certain people." "Harm?" Miss Marple repeated softly. "Or protect someone." Mr. Vale's eyes held hers. "Both," he said. Miss Marple nodded. "And you, Mr. Vale," she said gently. "You came here to hide. But you also came here because you believe those papers can protect you. Mr. Vale did not deny it. I came here because I have no choice, he replied. People like Mr. Caro do not forgive mistakes. And your late husband, Mrs. Harrow, decided he could bargain with what he stole. Now I must clean it up. Mrs. Harrow's voice shook. He did not steal, she said. Mr. Caro laughed quietly. He absolutely did, he said. He took what was meant to be destroyed. He thought he could keep it as insurance. And now, because he is dead, we will take it back. Miss Marple looked at Mrs. Harrow, her expression gentle. Mrs. Harrow, she said softly. Your husband said the safe was insurance. Insurance against whom? Mrs. Harrow's eyes filled. She looked as if she might break. But she held herself. Against men like him, she whispered, looking at Mr. Caro. Mr. Vale's jaw tightened. You see, he said quietly. She knows. Mr. Vale moved closer to Mrs. Harrow, his voice lowering, becoming intimate, almost kind. Lucy, he said, I did not want to frighten you. I wanted to help you, but you have made it difficult. If you do not give the key, Mr. Caro will search this house. He will turn it inside out. He will terrify your servants. He will involve police if he must. And he will find it anyway. Give it to me. Let me control what happens next. Miss Marple watched him closely. Let me control, she repeated softly. Mr. Vale's eyes flicked to her again, and this time the control in his own face looked strained. Miss Marple, he said, please do not interfere. Miss Marple's voice stayed mild. Interfere, she repeated. When a woman is cornered in her own home. Mr. Caro took a step, impatience rising. Enough, he said. We are not here for village lectures. Mrs. Harrow, you will give us the key now. Mrs. Harrow trembled. No, she whispered again. Mr. Caro's hand moved toward his coat pocket. It might have been a gesture of threat. It might have been nothing. But it changed the air. Miss Marple spoke quickly, still calm. Mr. Caro, she said, you said your men have been patient, yet you come in daylight now. You speak openly. That suggests you are under pressure. Mr. Caro's eyes narrowed. What nonsense, he said. Not nonsense, Miss Marple replied gently. If you could have handled this quietly, you would have done so at night. But now you are here in the morning, which means time has changed. Something has shifted. Someone is watching you. Mr. Vale's gaze tightened. Miss Marple, he said sharply. Miss Marple continued softly. Perhaps the papers in that safe are not only dangerous to Mrs. Harrow, she said. Perhaps they are dangerous to you both. Perhaps someone else wants them. Someone higher. Someone who would not tolerate failure. Mr. Caro's mouth tightened. He did not answer, and that was answer enough. Miss Marple turned to Mrs. Harrow. Mrs. Harrow, she said gently. Do you still have the key? Mrs. Harrow stared at her, understanding flickering. Yes, she whispered. Miss Marple nodded. Then do not give it away in fear, she said. Give it away in choice. Mr. Vale stepped forward, his composure cracking into urgency. Lucy, he said, hand it to me now. Mr. Caro's patience snapped. Search her, he said to Mr. Vale. Mr. Vale stiffened. No, he said quickly. I will not. Mr. Caro's eyes flashed. Then I will. He moved toward Mrs. Harrow, and Miss Bracknell cried out softly. Miss Marple did not raise her voice. She did something else. She stepped between them, not dramatically, but simply, like a woman moving to adjust a vase on a table. Mr. Caro stopped, surprised. Do not touch her, Miss Marple said softly. You will regret it. Mr. Caro stared. Who do you think you are, old woman? He hissed. Miss Marple's eyes were calm. Someone who knows villages, she replied. Someone who knows that your face will be remembered. Your coat, your voice, your path through the orchard. And someone who knows the constable's cousin attends church with the baker's wife. Mr. Caro's mouth tightened. He glanced toward the window as if suddenly aware of eyes outside. Mr. Vale spoke quickly, desperate again. Miss Marple, stop, he said. You are making this worse. No, Mr. Vale, Miss Marple replied gently. You made it worse the moment you brought him here. Mr. Vale's face changed then. The polite mask slipped, revealing a hard determination beneath. I did what I had to do, he said. So did your husband, Mrs. Harrow whispered, tears in her eyes. He did what he had to do. Mr. Vale's voice went cold. Your husband was careless, he said. He got himself killed. Silence struck the room like a hand. Mrs. Harrow went still. Miss Bracknell gasped. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed slightly. Got himself killed, she repeated softly. Mr. Vale realized what he had said. His mouth tightened. His eyes flicked to Mr. Caro, then back. I meant, he began. But Miss Marple's mind had already caught the thread. This was not only about papers. Not only about leverage. Mr. Harrow's death had been too convenient. Miss Marple looked at Mr. Caro. Did Mr. Harrow die naturally? She asked quietly. Mr. Caro's face was blank. He died, he said. That is all that matters. Miss Marple turned back to Mr. Vale, her voice still calm, but sharpened like a needle. You came here to hide, she said. But you also came here because you know what those papers say. And you know why Mr. Harrow is dead. Mr. Vale's eyes flashed. You know nothing, he said. Miss Marple smiled faintly. Then why have you never slept? She asked softly. People who are innocent sleep eventually. Even frightened people sleep. But you have not slept. Because you are not only afraid of being found, you are afraid of what will be proved. The room felt tighter. Even the fire seemed to crackle less. Mr. Caro stepped back, eyes darting. For the first time he looked uncertain. Mr. Vale's shoulders rose and fell once. A controlled breath. Mrs. Harrow whispered, trembling. The key. You took it before. You returned it. You wanted me to know you could take it any time. But you did not. You were waiting for him. Mr. Vale's eyes went to her, and in them was a cold honesty. Yes, he said softly. I was waiting. Because Mr. Caro is not the only one who wants what is in that safe. Miss Marple felt the pieces align. Tomorrow and bring it. It was never only about the safe contents. It was about who would control them. Miss Marple spoke calmly, as if offering a simple solution. Mrs. Harrow, she said, the safest place for that key is not your sewing box. It is not this house. It is with someone they cannot search. Mrs. Harrow looked at her, desperate. Who? She whispered. Miss Marple's eyes were steady. The police, she said softly. Not the village constable alone. The proper authorities. Because whatever is in that safe connects to something larger than St Aldwyn. Mr. Vale's expression tightened. No, he said. You cannot. Mr. Caro's voice turned sharp. If you involve police, he began. Miss Marple raised her hand slightly. You are already involving the police, she said calmly. The moment you stepped onto this property and threatened a woman. You simply have not accepted it yet. She turned to Miss Bracknell. Edith, she said gently. Go to the vicarage. Tell the vicar to send for the constable immediately. Say there is trespass and threats at Hawthorne House. Say it clearly. Do not soften it. Miss Bracknell hesitated, then nodded and slipped out like a shadow. Her footsteps quick but quiet. Mr. Vale moved as if to stop her, but Miss Marple looked at him. Do not, she said softly. If you move now, you show your hand. Mr. Vale froze. Mr. Caro's jaw worked. He glanced toward the door, then toward the window again. This is not finished, he said. No, Miss Marple replied. It is beginning. Mrs. Harrow's breath came in small, sharp waves. She clutched her necklace, then let it fall. as if finally realizing it would not protect her. "What do I do?" she whispered. Miss Marple's voice remained calm. "You tell the truth," she said. "All of it. About the letters, the calls, the safe, the key, the night movements, Mr. Vale's presence. Everything. Truth is the only thing that cannot be stolen and returned like a message." Mr. Vale stared at Miss Marple, and for the first time, the sleeplessness in his face looked like what it truly was. Not only fear, guilt. Outside, a distant sound reached them. A bicycle bell, faint and urgent. Someone was going for help. Mr. Caro backed toward the door, his ordinary face tight with calculation. Mr. Vale remained still, his eyes locked on the hidden panel and the safe behind the shelf, as if the safe were not only a metal box but a verdict waiting to be spoken. And Miss Marple stood quietly between them and Mrs. Harrow. Not dramatic, not loud, just present, because sometimes the most powerful thing in a room full of threats is a calm witness who refuses to look away. Chapter 6. The sound of the bicycle bell came again, closer this time, then faded as it turned into the lane. In Hawthorne House's study, no one moved for a moment. It was as if the house itself held its breath, listening for what the village would do next. Mr. Caro stood near the door with one hand half raised, not quite touching the handle. His eyes moved quickly now. Window, door, floor, faces. He was a man measuring exits. Mr. Vale did not move at all. He watched the hidden panel as if the safe behind it were the only real object in the room. The fire crackled. The curtains hung still. Mrs. Harrow remained upright by stubborn pride, her hands trembling faintly at her sides. Miss Marple felt no urge to hurry. She had seen men like Mr. Caro before, though perhaps not in this particular house. She had seen the same restless calculation in other eyes, and she had learned that calmness was often the best form of resistance. Panic fed other people's strength. Mr. Caro cleared his throat. "This is a ridiculous overreaction," he said. "A misunderstanding. We can all behave like sensible adults." Miss Marple's voice was mild. "Then you will have no objection to speaking to the constable when he arrives," she replied. Mr. Caro's jaw tightened. "I have no time for village officers," he said. "No one ever thinks they have time for consequences," Miss Marple replied gently. Mr. Vale finally moved. He stepped toward Mrs. Harrow and lowered his voice, almost tender. "Lucy," he said, "you can still avoid disgrace. Give me the key now. Let me open the safe before any policeman steps into this room. Then whatever is inside can be removed quietly. Your husband's mistakes will remain buried, and you will keep your name clean. I am trying to help you." Mrs. Harrow stared at him with eyes that no longer trusted. "Help me," she whispered. "You used my fear as a lever." Mr. Vale's face tightened. "I did what I had to do," he said again. But now it sounded like a confession. Miss Marple watched him. "You have said that often, Mr. Vale," she observed softly. "People who say it often usually mean something else. They mean, I chose myself." Mr. Vale's eyes flashed with controlled anger. "You have no understanding of what is at stake," he said. Miss Marple tilted her head slightly. "Then tell us," she replied calmly. "What is at stake?" Mr. Vale's mouth opened, then closed. His gaze flicked to Mr. Caro, as if he was weighing the risk of speaking. Mr. Caro's expression hardened. "Do not talk," Mr. Caro said sharply. That was enough. The command was too quick, too certain. It revealed a relationship not of equals, but of pressure and fear. Miss Marple looked at Mr. Caro. "You are used to controlling conversations," she said gently. "But villages are full of conversations you cannot hear." Mr. Caro's lips curled. "Old woman," he muttered. Miss Marple continued as if he had not spoken. "Mrs. Harrow," she said softly, "the key is still hidden." Mrs. Harrow swallowed. "Yes," she whispered. Miss Marple nodded. "Good," she said. "Keep it hidden. Do not touch it again until the authorities arrive. Let it remain where it is. We do not play their game any longer." Mr. Vale took another step. "Lucy," he said through his teeth, "do not be stubborn. If Caro is forced to leave empty-handed, he will not simply disappear. You will invite worse into your home." Mrs. Harrow's voice shook, but it held a new firmness. "Worse is already here," she said. Mr. Vale froze. For a moment, his mask slipped. His eyes showed exhaustion so deep it looked like a bruise, and beneath it something harder. Then footsteps sounded in the hall. Not light servant steps. Heavier. Determined. Voices followed, muffled. Miss Bracknell's voice, breathless. "This way, constable. Please. This way." The door to the study opened, and the village constable entered, hat in hand, cheeks red from haste. Behind him stood the vicar, looking shocked and worried and very much out of his depth. Two other men followed. One the gardener, Mr. Dawes, and another a neighbor who had clearly come because he could not resist. Constable Harris looked from face to face, confused. "Mrs. Harrow," he began. "Reverend said there was trouble." Mrs. Harrow's voice trembled, but she lifted her chin. "There is," she said. "These men are trespassing. Mr. Caro has threatened me." Mr. Caro raised his hands at once, adopting a tone of mild offense. "Threatened," he said. "Constable, surely you can see this is melodramatic. We are discussing a private matter, a business matter." Constable Harris frowned. "On her property," he said slowly. "And you are?" Mr. Caro smiled. "A visitor," he said. Constable Harris looked at Mrs. Harrow. "Did you invite him, madam?" he asked. "No," Mrs. Harrow said clearly. Mr. Vale spoke quickly. "Constable," he said, "I can explain. Mr. Caro is here because of a matter connected to Mrs. Harrow's late husband. There are documents. There is confusion. We have all been under stress." Miss Marple spoke softly. "Constable," she said, "stress does not give a man the right to threaten a woman in her own study." Constable Harris blinked at Miss Marple, then nodded, as if the simple statement steadied him. "Quite," he said, "quite right." Mr. Caro's eyes narrowed. "Constable," he said, "I advise you not to involve yourself. This is not village business. It concerns people beyond St. Aldwyn." The constable stiffened at the tone. "I am involved," he replied, "because Mrs. Harrow says she was threatened. Now, I will have names and I will have details." Mr. Caro hesitated. His ordinary face tightened. "Caro," he said finally. "And where are you staying?" Constable Harris asked. Mr. Caro's gaze flicked toward the door. "I am not staying," he said. "I will be leaving." Constable Harris stepped forward. "Not yet," he said. "Not until I have taken a statement." Mr. Vale moved slightly, as if to intervene, but the vicar raised his voice for the first time, sounding oddly firm. "Mr. Vale," he said, "let the constable do his duty." Mr. Vale stared at the vicar, surprised by the resistance. Mrs. Harrow spoke quickly. "Constable," she said, "there is a safe in this room, hidden behind that bookshelf. Someone has been trying to open it at night. Tools have been found. There are letters. Threats. My husband kept something there. These men want it." The constable blinked again, overwhelmed. "A safe," he repeated. Mr. Caro's voice turned sharp. "This is absurd," he said. "There is nothing illegal in wanting property returned." Miss Marple's tone remained calm. "Then you will not object to the safe remaining closed until proper authorities arrive," she said. Mr. Vale's face tightened. "Proper authorities," he repeated. "Yes," Miss Marple replied. "Because this is clearly larger than a village dispute. Mrs. Harrow has been receiving threatening calls. A man has been visiting at night. And there are documents which may involve criminal behavior." Constable Harris swallowed. I can send for Inspector Bland from the town station, he said. He is not far. Please do, Miss Marple replied gently. Mr. Carrow's eyes flashed. No, he said. The constable stared at him. You do not tell me no, sir, he said, finding his spine. Not in this house. Mr. Carrow's jaw worked. He looked at Mr. Vale. Mr. Vale's eyes had become glassy with tension. He was calculating, too, but in a different way. He was trapped between fear of Mr. Carrow and fear of what would be found. Mrs. Harrow's voice came in a whisper, but it carried. My husband did not die naturally, she said. Not truly, and I have known it in my bones for months. Now I want truth. The room went still. The vicar inhaled sharply. Constable Harris looked as if the floor had shifted. Mr. Vale's face went pale. Mr. Carrow's expression hardened into something ugly. That is a vile accusation, he snapped. Miss Marple watched them both. Accusations can be vile, she said softly, but they can also be accurate. Constable Harris cleared his throat. Right, he said. Right then. Everyone stays. No one leaves this room. Reverend, would you mind, perhaps, standing by the door? The vicar, though frightened, nodded and positioned himself near the doorway as if sheer morality could block escape. Constable Harris stepped out to send for the inspector. Mr. Dawes stood rigid, eyes wide. Miss Bracknell hovered near Mrs. Harrow like a faithful shadow. Mr. Carrow took one slow step, then stopped. Mr. Vale's voice lowered. Lucy, he murmured. You are making a mistake. Mrs. Harrow looked at him with a strange calm. No, she replied. I am ending one. Miss Marple remained quiet, her presence steady. Because now the night's secrets were being pulled into daylight. And daylight, unlike darkness, required people to account for themselves. Inspector Bland arrived within the hour. He was a man of middle years, with a weathered face and the calm authority of someone who had seen human drama in many forms, and had stopped being impressed by it. He removed his hat, listened briefly to the constable's hurried explanation, then looked around the study with eyes that noticed everything. Mrs. Harrow spoke first. Her voice shook at times, but she told her story clearly. The threatening letters, the calls, her husband's mysterious safe, Mr. Vale's arrival, the sleepless nights, the orchard gate, the tools found in the back stair cupboard, the stranger entering the property and demanding the key. Miss Bracknell confirmed what she had heard and seen at night. Her voice trembled, but she did not soften her words. She spoke of the low voice at the back door, of tomorrow, of bring it, of torchlight in the study window. Mr. Dawes confirmed he had seen the stranger on the orchard boundary. The inspector listened without interruption, only nodding occasionally. When they finished, he turned his gaze to Mr. Vale and Mr. Carrow. Mr. Vale, he said calmly, you will speak now. Mr. Vale's face held that same exhausted control. His eyes looked as if they had not truly closed in weeks. I am not a criminal, he said. Inspector Bland nodded as if he had heard that sentence 1,000 times. Many people are not, he replied. Yet they still do criminal things. Why have you been awake every night? Mr. Vale swallowed. I cannot sleep, he said. That is not an answer, the inspector replied gently. Why can you not sleep? Mr. Vale's jaw tightened. His gaze flicked toward Mr. Carrow. Mr. Carrow stared back, warning and cold. Miss Marple watched it all quietly. She saw the relationship clearly now. Mr. Carrow was not the partner. He was the pressure. Mr. Vale was not the commander. He was the instrument. Inspector Bland continued. You asked about tunnels and old passages, he said. You borrowed parish records and land maps. You attempted to access a hidden safe. You brought a man onto this property. You demanded a key. You will tell me why. Mr. Vale's shoulders rose and fell once. A slow breath. Then his voice changed. It became less polished. Because if I fail, I will be blamed, he said. Blamed by whom? The inspector asked. Mr. Vale's eyes flicked again to Mr. Carow. By him, Mr. Vale whispered. And by those above him. Mr. Carrow's mouth tightened. You are talking too much, he snapped. Inspector Bland turned his gaze to Mr. Carow. Mr. Carow, he said calmly. You will be quiet, or you will be removed from this room. Mr. Carow opened his mouth, then closed it. His eyes remained sharp, but he did not speak. Mr. Vale's voice continued, quieter now. Mr. Harrow kept papers, he said. Evidence, names, sums, arrangements. He took them from an office in London where he worked. He thought he could use them if the wrong people came after him. He hid them here. When he died, those people panicked. They sent Mr. Carow. Inspector Bland nodded. And you, he said. Mr. Vale swallowed. I was in that office too, he said. I signed things. I delivered messages. I kept quiet. Then something went wrong. Someone was arrested in another matter. And suddenly people began to destroy records. Mr. Harrow did not. He kept them. And now if those papers are found, my name will be in them. Mrs. Harrow's voice trembled. So you came here to save yourself, she said. Mr. Vale looked at her, and for a moment his expression softened. Yes, he said. But not only that. I did not want you harmed. I did not want the village dragged in. Miss Marple spoke softly. Yet you brought harm in with you, she observed. Mr. Vale's eyes flicked to her. I thought I could manage it, he said. Inspector Bland stepped closer to the hidden panel. The safe, he said. Is it still locked? Mrs. Harrow nodded. Yes, she said. I have the key. I did not bring it into the room. Good, the inspector replied. Keep it that way until I instruct otherwise. He turned to Mr. Carow. Mr. Carow, he said. Why did you come here? Not the polished answer. The true one. Mr. Carrow's face remained blank. To retrieve stolen property, he said. Inspector Bland nodded. Then you will not object to retrieving it legally, he said. With witnesses. With proper record. If it is truly property and not evidence. Mr. Carrow's mouth tightened. You do not understand the kind of people involved, he said. Inspector Bland's tone remained calm, but it carried steel. I understand enough, he replied. I understand you trespassed. I understand you threatened. I understand you have been visiting at night. And I understand that if those papers are evidence of wider crimes, this is no longer simply my matter. It will become Scotland Yard's matter. At the word Scotland Yard, Mr. Carrow's face changed. Just slightly. But it did. Miss Marple noticed. The inspector noticed too. Inspector Bland looked at the constable. Harris, he said. Take Mr. Carow outside. Keep him under watch. He is not to leave. Mr. Carrow's eyes flared. You cannot, he began. Constable Harris stepped forward, suddenly confident. I can, sir, he said. Mr. Carow was escorted out, protesting quietly but forced to obey. Mr. Vale remained in the study. The room felt different with Mr. Carow gone. Less sharp. Still tense, but cleaner. Inspector Bland turned to Mrs. Harrow. Now, madam, he said, we will open the safe. You will hand me the key. Miss Bracknell and Miss Marple will remain as witnesses. The Reverend, too, if he is willing. The vicar swallowed and nodded, pale but determined. Mrs. Harrow rose with trembling hands. I will get it, she whispered. She left the room briefly and returned with the brass key held between finger and thumb as if it were something that might burn her. Inspector Bland took it carefully. We will do this properly, he said. He moved to the hidden panel. The bookshelf shifted. The safe door waited, dark and scarred with fresh tool marks. The inspector inserted the key. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft click, the lock yielded. The sound was small, but in that room, it felt like a verdict being spoken. Inspector Bland opened the safe. Inside were papers, bundled and tied. A thick envelope. A ledger. A few folded documents that looked older, creased with age. There was also a small leather notebook, its cover worn. The inspector lifted them carefully and placed them on the desk. He opened the ledger first. His eyes moved over names and numbers. His face did not change much, but Miss Marple saw the slight tightening around his mouth. The kind that meant he was seeing something ugly, but not unexpected. Mr. Vale's face went gray. "That is it," he whispered. Inspector Bland looked at him. "Yes," he said. "That is it." He opened the leather notebook. It contained handwritten notes, dates, and something else. A list of meetings. A list of payments. And in the margin, beside one date, a short phrase. "Hawthorne. Tonight." Inspector Bland's gaze lifted. "Tonight," he repeated softly. Miss Marple felt a quiet chill. "He planned to come," she said gently. "Whoever wrote this planned another visit." Mrs. Harrow's hands shook. "My husband wrote that," she whispered. "He wrote notes in little books. He always did." The inspector studied another page. His finger paused. "And this," he said quietly. "This is a note about a doctor. A village doctor." Mrs. Harrow's eyes widened. "Dr. Phelps," she whispered. Inspector Bland nodded. "It appears your husband suspected something about his health," he said. "He recorded a visit, a medication, a dosage that was altered." Mrs. Harrow's face went white. "You mean," she whispered, "you mean he was poisoned?" Inspector Bland did not rush to certainty. He said, he suspected interference. "This notebook may be evidence." Miss Marple spoke softly. "And Mr. Vale said he got himself killed," she reminded gently. "Not died. Killed." Mr. Vale's eyes filled suddenly, not with tears, but with despair. "I did not kill him," he said hoarsely. "I swear it, I did not." Inspector Bland's voice remained calm. "Perhaps not," he said. "But you knew enough to fear what was in that safe. And you knew enough to try to control it." Mr. Vale's shoulders sagged. "Yes," he whispered. "I knew." Mrs. Harrow sank into a chair, her dignity cracking at last. "All this time," she murmured, "all this time I have been living in a house with a weapon in the wall." Miss Marple moved closer and touched her hand lightly. "It is no longer hidden," she said softly. "Hidden things grow stronger. Exposed things can be handled." Inspector Bland gathered the papers and placed them back into the safe, but kept the notebook and ledger out. "These will come with me," he said. "This becomes a larger investigation. Mr. Carroll will be held and questioned. Mr. Vale, you will come too. You will give a full statement." Mr. Vale nodded weakly. "Yes," he said. Inspector Bland looked at Mrs. Harrow. "You have done the right thing now," he said. "It may feel dreadful, but it is the right thing." Mrs. Harrow's voice shook. "Will they come back?" she whispered. The people behind him. Inspector Bland's gaze was steady. "They might try," he admitted, "but they will find this house watched now. And they will find the law very awake." Miss Marple's eyes moved to the window. The day outside was brightening. The village looked ordinary again, but ordinary was not the same as safe. When the inspector and constable finally left with Mr. Carrow and Mr. Vale, Hawthorne House fell into a strange quiet. Not the tense-held breath of before. A different quiet. The quiet after truth has been spoken, when the air has to learn a new shape. Miss Bracknell began to tidy without being asked, because tidying was her way of coping. The vicar murmured prayers under his breath, because prayer was his. Mrs. Harrow sat staring at the empty space where the safe had been, her face drawn. Miss Marple stood in the doorway of the study for a moment and looked at the scratch marks on the safe door. They seemed less threatening now, because they had failed. The house had resisted, not through strength, but through stubborn secrecy, and then, finally, through truth. Later, as Miss Marple walked back to the vicarage, the village greeted her with polite smiles that did not yet know what had happened. Children ran, a dog barked. The milk cart rattled again. Life went on, as it always insisted on doing. But Miss Marple knew something else. The guest who never slept had not been watching for a ghost. He had been watching for consequences. And now, at last, consequences had arrived. The days that followed were calmer, though St Aldwyn did not speak of the matter directly. The village rarely did. It simply adjusted, as villages always adjust, by closing ranks around those it considered its own. Hawthorne House remained quiet, its upper window finally dark at night, the light no longer burning like an accusation. Mrs. Harrow found her strength in small acts. She walked her garden paths again. She wrote letters in the morning without trembling. And she stopped touching her necklace as if it were a charm. Miss Bracknell slept properly for the first time in weeks, and the servants moved through the halls without that careful, frightened softness. Inspector Bland returned once to take further statements. Mr. Carow did not come back. Mr. Vale did not return either. The papers from the safe went away under official seal, and with them went the power they had held over the house. One evening, Miss Marple sat with the vicar by the fire and listened to the steady ticking of the clock. Peace, she thought, was not the absence of danger. It was the restoration of truth. When the truth was spoken aloud, even quietly, the night lost its hold. Outside, St. Aldwyn settled into sleep. And this time, nothing waited in the dark.